Chapter 471. The promise made by Nermingard will be fulfilled. All members of the advance team had safely returned. Rohir entered Grindelwald's office and relayed this news. The office was filled with those who had just participated in the operation, waiting quietly. Upon hearing Rohir's report, smiles broke out among them. Excellent. As long as everyone is back safely, and since we've left no trace, the goblins have no evidence to act against us, Grindelwald announced. You all may return and rest. Rest assured, your contributions have not gone unnoticed. He casually picked up a box from his desk and handed it to Vita. Take this and distribute it accordingly, he instructed, not particularly concerned about the contents, which came from an unfortunate soul's vault. Rohir, understanding Grindelwald's typical indifference, took the box and left the office with the others, leaving only Grindelwald and Blake. Without any preamble, Grindelwald asked, "What did you seek from the Storancy family's treasury?" Blake revealed Hufflepuff's golden cup, causing an immediate reaction from Grindelwald. A chill ran through him, a sensation he knew all too well was caused by dark artifacts of immense evil. This feels familiar. Wait. After a moment, recognition dawned on him. Is this another of that madman's Horcruxes? Yes, exactly, Blake confirmed. Grindelwald frowned, troubled by the thought. How many Horcruxes did he create? Splitting his soul so many times, how has he not lost his mind? He was deeply concerned about the implications of such actions. Voldemort's later decisions were far from rational, a clear sign of his madness. What he desires above all is immortality, and he's willing to pay any price for it. To him, sanity is a small sacrifice, Blake explained. Grindelwald scoffed at the notion. I would never pursue immortality at such a cost. But how did you know the cup was in the Lester clan's treasury? Blake produced a box containing a lech and smiled. I've transformed Voldemort's remaining soul. His memories couldn't hide from me. Grindelwald nodded, accepting the explanation, though he knew Blake hadn't learned the location from Voldemort's memories. It was the only plausible explanation, and he didn't question it further. Blake then mentioned his intention to show the Horcrux to Dumbledore, anticipating the need to manage Dumbledore's reaction to such a discovery. Grindelwald, intrigued, asked to see the transformed soul of Voldemort. As he examined the lich with fascination, Blake busied himself with various materials, crafting something new. What are you working on? Grindelwald inquired, noticing Blake's project. Blake sighed. You mentioned wanting an enchanted revolver, remember? Grindelwald laughed, pleased that Blake remembered his offhand request. I thought you were just humoring me. I'm genuinely delighted you're considering it. Blake paused. You said it wasn't necessary. No, I truly desire it, Grindelwald assured him, his eyes gleaming with sincerity. Meanwhile, Fudge was overwhelmed by the recent events. The operation at Gringotts had escalated tensions between goblins and wizards. He feared the possibility of renewed conflict with the goblins, who wielded considerable power. This chapter has been revised for clarity, flow, and coherence, ensuring a more engaging and understandable narrative. The financial and economic stability of the wizarding world was teetering on the brink of war. The repercussions of such a conflict would not be confined to the UK alone. Goblins, known for their unity and exclusivity, could potentially bring the fragile economic order of the global wizarding community to its knees. In such a scenario, as the British Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge found himself cursing Grindelwald under his breath. He hastily donned his coat and made his way out. His immediate destination was Gringotts. He needed to negotiate with the goblins. During this critical moment, Fudge found himself longing for the wisdom and guidance of Dumbledore. Hare's recent estrangement meant that Dumbledore was unlikely to offer his assistance voluntarily. And as for Grindelwald, after causing such turmoil, he had conveniently disappeared, leaving Fudge to deal with the aftermath. Fudge knew better than to expect any help from Grindelwald. In fact, the more chaos there was at Gringotts, the more Grindelwald would revel in it. Accompanied by a few Aurors, Fudge was about to take the Floo network directly to Diagon Alley. However, upon descending the stairs, he was taken aback by the sight of a familiar figure. Dumbledore was seated in the reception area of the Ministry of Magic, engrossed in a newspaper, his expression grave. His presence in the ministry was unmistakable and immediately caught Fudge's attention. Surprised, Fudge wondered what had brought Dumbledore here. As if sensing Fudge's gaze, Dumbledore looked up, their eyes meeting. He folded his newspaper, stood, and approached Fudge. "Connolly, I'm aware of the situation. I thought you might need assistance," Dumbledore said, his voice calm and steady. Fudge was taken aback. Despite their recent conflicts, Dumbledore was offering his help. Fudge stammered, conflicted. He was desperate for help in negotiating with the goblins, but he questioned Dumbledore's sincerity. Could Dumbledore truly be offering his help without any ulterior motives? Dumbledore, understanding Fudge's hesitation, sighed. "Connolly, this issue transcends any personal grievances between us. If not addressed properly, it will harm us all." Looking into Dumbledore's sincere eyes, Fudge felt a wave of relief wash over him. It was a familiar feeling, the reassurance that with Dumbledore's presence, no problem was insurmountable. Fudge felt a pang of guilt for doubting him. Okay, I was about to head to Diagon Alley. Let's go together," Fudge finally agreed. Meanwhile, at Gringotts, in an office adorned with various gold artifacts, several elderly goblins were gathered, their expressions dark and foreboding. "How many vaults were compromised this time?" inquired an old goblin seated behind the desk. 21 large vaults and 6 smaller ones were completely emptied. Another goblin reported, the distress evident in his voice as if the loss was personal. Furthermore, there were precisely 21 thieves involved in last night's break-in. 21 individuals targeting 21 vaults. This is no ordinary group of thieves, the seated goblin mused, his brow furrowed in concern. "Manager, we must immediately inform President Locke about this," urged another goblin. The manager rubbed his forehead, troubled. "I understand, but President Locke is currently unreachable. He's in a location I'm not privy to." "Where has President Locke gone?" another goblin inquired, curiosity piqued. "That's beyond my clearance. However, given the severity of this incident, I'm certain President Locke will be informed. He'll return once he's aware," the manager assured them, though the group quickly steered the conversation away from the sensitive topic of President Locke's whereabouts. The discussion surrounding the loss at Gringotts and the identity of the thief intensified. Although the Gringotts building has suffered severe damage, it's still standing, which is somewhat of a relief, one goblin remarked. However, the wealth lost from those stolen vaults is astronomical. More importantly, we've lost credibility. If people no longer believe that Gringotts is the safest place to store their gold, they might stop using our services altogether. That's correct. Among the vaults that were ransacked was Grindelwald's vault. Today, representatives from Grindelwald were supposed to withdraw money. "This is going to be another headache," another goblin added worriedly. "And the thieves, why did they choose this moment to strike? Moreover, the weapons they used appeared to be modified Muggle weapons. I've never seen wizards use such things before." "No, manager, I recall an organization that uses this kind of modified mug, the weapon. Don't you remember the attack on Blake Green a few weeks ago?" At this, the goblin manager suddenly stood up, realization dawning on him. "It seems we're close to uncovering the identity of the thieves," he exclaimed, noticing the puzzled looks from the other goblins. "I know who hired these individuals for the Blake Green attack." Meanwhile, the crowd in Diagon Alley was larger than usual. People were eager to see the aftermath of the significant change at Gringotts firsthand, especially after this morning's Daily Prophet featured a front-page report on the robbery. The report included an animated image of Gringotts' dome being breached by a fire dragon. Authored by Rita Skeeter, the article was filled with her typical fabrications, yet this time she seemed to be influenced by someone else. The headline itself was rife with conspiracy theories. Gringotts suffers a century-rare grand robbery. Is this a self-staged conspiracy by the goblins? Skeeter's article speculated on the goblins' ulterior motives, suggesting Gringotts, known as the safest place in the wizarding world, second only to Hogwarts under Dumbledore's leadership, has been breached. Such a well-guarded institution facing a large-scale robbery hints at a deeper secret. She recalled recent significant events, notably Grindelwald's proposal for a social welfare institution, and mentioned that representatives from Nurmengard were scheduled to withdraw a substantial amount of money from Gringotts that morning. But just before the withdrawal, Gringotts was robbed. It's no coincidence that Nurmengard's representatives couldn't retrieve even a single copper nut from Gringotts today, as the bank is now heavily guarded by goblins, turning away any wizard who approaches. Skeeter's report, though largely fabricated, sowed seeds of doubt among the public. Why would Gringotts, secure for so many years, suddenly be robbed right before a significant withdrawal? The timing is too suspicious, and undoubtedly Grindelwald's welfare institution plan will be put on hold due to this incident. As a result, those in poverty who had been awaiting the establishment of the welfare institutions were in uproar. Anger spread among them, fueled by Skeeter's report. "We need to speak with your president. I'm sure you understand the urgency," Dumbledore said to an elf guard at the entrance of Gringotts, his expression grave. He, too, had noticed the unsettling changes and the growing unrest among the people. The tension in the air was palpable as the wizards around him absorbed the contents of the newspaper article, realizing the magnitude of the storm brewing. Dumbledore, understanding the critical situation, had rushed to negotiate with the goblins. It was essential for Gringotts to lift the blockade, even temporarily. Without access to their funds, the wizarding community could descend into chaos, especially if those with ill intentions decided to exploit the situation. Dumbledore was well aware that Grindelwald and Blake were behind the turmoil. Despite his reservations about Grindelwald's reckless methods, Dumbledore was prepared to manage the fallout. As for Blake, Dumbledore couldn't help but think of him as the one who led astray. "Back off!" The goblin guard, brandishing his crossbow, directed his command at Dumbledore and Fudge. Fudge, momentarily taken aback, retreated a step before his pride kicked in, and he retorted with a glare, "I am the Minister of Magic!" "Back off!" Fudge, flustered, was about to respond when a calming, aged voice intervened from behind the guard. "Don't hurt the guests," it said. Manager Lance's appearance brought a sigh of relief from Dumbledore. It seemed there was room for dialogue after all. "Minister Fudge, Professor Dumbledore, as you can see, Gringotts has taken a significant hit. I trust you can empathize with our current state," Lance expressed, his expression troubled. Dumbledore responded with a gentle tone. "We understand your position, Manager Lance, and that's precisely why we're here, to offer our help. Thieves may be among us, but not all wizards are to blame. It's unfair to punish the entire wizarding community for the actions of a few." "You're right, Professor Dumbledore. I assure you, Gringotts has no intention of alienating innocent wizards. However, please understand that Gringotts must suspend its services for a few days," Lance conceded. Fudge, interpreting Lance's words as a temporary delay rather than an outright denial, felt a wave of relief. The situation seemed manageable, not escalating to a full-blown crisis. "What if I say I don't accept it?" A cold voice cut through the conversation, drawing displeased looks from the goblins. Vita Roche, followed by a group, approached with determination. "I'm not concerned about others, but we need to withdraw funds today for our welfare institution." Fudge's anger dissipated upon recognizing Grindelwald. Attempting to defuse the situation, he suggested, "Perhaps it could be postponed for a few days? A short delay shouldn't affect the welfare institution too severely, right?" Grindelwald's response was firm, leaving no room for negotiation. What Nurmengard promises, it delivers. Not a day, not even a minute late. The standoff at Gringotts highlighted the complex dynamics between the wizarding community and the goblins, with Dumbledore and Fudge caught in the middle, trying to navigate the turbulent waters stirred by Grindelwald's unwavering demands. Chapter 472, The Gringotts Incident. Whose concern is it? Rohir's firm stance momentarily buoyed Fudge's spirits, especially as he observed the goblin's grim expressions darken further. He speculated that Grindelwald's machinations were pushing the goblins and wizards towards conflict. Yet, contrary to his expectations of a fallout, the atmosphere did not escalate as anticipated. Lance, the goblin, after a moment of stern contemplation, softened his approach. "We merely request your patience for a few days," Lance began, his tone markedly more conciliatory. "Gringotts has sustained considerable damage, and we need time to address the aftermath. Only then can we resume our services to you." Fudge, taken aback by the sudden shift in demeanor, couldn't help but wonder about the change. Accustomed to a more straightforward interaction, He hadn't considered that the goblins, much like the wizards, were keen on avoiding a war. After all, if the goblins had the power to overcome wizards, the world would be a very different place. The establishment of a welfare institution is a significant step for the betterment of the entire wizarding community, including goblins, Fudge argued, emphasizing the universal benefit. Delaying its funding, even by a day, could be detrimental to many. Therefore, we expect the funds to be available today, as per our agreement. Moreover, our deposits in Gringotts are just that, deposits. They are not the property of Gringotts, and we should be able to withdraw them as needed. The incident at Gringotts, while unfortunate, is not our concern. If the roles were reversed, I believe you would demand the same from us. Rohir's refusal to yield, coupled with his pointed reminder of the wizards' entitlement to their funds, resonated with the crowd gathered around Gringotts. The frustration among the wizards was palpable, especially since many had come to withdraw money only to be turned away without explanation or apology. The goblins' indifferent stance only fueled their grievances. Lance, observing Rohir's unapologetic stance, realized her intentions were far from benign. She was exploiting Gringotts' vulnerability, stirring unrest among the wizards. The crowd's growing agitation seemed almost Muggle-like in its intensity, driven by the inability to access their funds, a situation made dire by the fact that numerous vaults had been plundered, a detail kept from the public eye. The secrecy surrounding the extent of the heist was crucial, revealing that many vaults, including those belonging to influential pure-blood families, had been emptied, would shatter trust in Gringotts' security. Such a revelation would be catastrophic, both for the bank's reputation and for the wizarding world at large. In a bid to protect this secret and buy time to recover the stolen assets, Lance had no choice but to delay withdrawals, a decision that, while pragmatic, only added to the mounting tension. The tension in the air was palpable as Rohir, with narrowed eyes, addressed the crowd in a voice loud enough for everyone present to hear. "I don't understand. I merely wish to withdraw my money. Is this request causing you embarrassment, or has Gringotts suffered far greater losses than we've been led to believe?" His words immediately altered the atmosphere, casting a shadow of doubt over the proceedings. Lance, visibly taken aback by the accusation, realized the situation had escalated beyond a simple inquiry. Rohir's pointed questions had ignited a firestorm of concern among the gathered wizards and witches, many of whom were there out of a pressing need for their funds. The underlying fear was that the goblins might shift the financial burden of any losses onto their customers. The crowd's growing unrest and loud demands for their money only added to the pressure. Lance, feeling the weight of the situation, announced his intention to consult with Gringotts' senior executives before making any decisions. As he retreated into the bank, leaving behind a chorus of complaints and accusations, Rohir's lips curled into a slight smile. The scenario was unfolding exactly as Blake had predicted. The solution to the current dilemma was, in theory, straightforward. The goblins could simply process withdrawals at the entrance using their own reserves to cover any immediate shortfalls, thus avoiding the need for customers to access the vaults directly. This approach would safeguard Gringotts' reputation while addressing the wizard's concerns. However, as Blake had astutely observed, the goblins' inherent greed made this solution virtually untenable. The idea of using their own wealth to temporarily support the wizards was anathema to them. As Lance disappeared into the depths of Gringotts, Dumbledore, who had been observing the exchange with a growing sense of unease, approached Rohir. "What exactly are you trying to achieve?" he asked, his voice tinged with hesitation. Rohir met his gaze calmly, responding, "We simply wish to retrieve our money. Is that request so unreasonable?" The question left both Dumbledore and Fudge momentarily speechless. Despite the aggressive tactics, Rohir's demand was fundamentally justifiable. Dumbledore, after a moment of reflection, pulled Fudge aside. "Cornelius, it appears the situation may not escalate in the manner we feared. That, at least, is a relief," he remarked. Fudge, however, seemed uncertain. Dumbledore clarified, "If the goblins were truly preparing for war, they wouldn't resort to stalling tactics. What we're witnessing is a dispute between a bank and its clients, not a prelude to conflict. Gringotts does not represent the entirety of goblinkind." Reassured by Dumbledore's analysis, Fudge inquired about their next steps. "We must ensure the Aurors maintain order among the crowd and address their grievances as best we can," Dumbledore advised. The goal was to prevent the situation from deteriorating further, keeping the peace while the bank sought a resolution that would satisfy all parties involved. Attempting to mitigate the escalating tensions between wizards and goblins, Dumbledore advised, "Try to avoid direct conflicts between them and the goblins." He was aware that the situation was still worsening. "It seems the goblins will not consent to the withdrawal of funds," he mused, reflecting on the complexity of the issue at hand. Fudge, understanding the gravity of the situation, agreed. "Following Grindelwald's example will only incite people's emotions and provoke attacks on the goblins." He recognized Grindelwald's tactic of manipulating emotions all too well. "I'll do my utmost to manage the situation and prevent it from spiraling out of control. But there's only so much I can do," Fudge admitted, acknowledging the limitations of his influence in the face of Grindelwald's machinations. The potential for conflict to escalate was a constant threat. As Dumbledore observed the growing crowds around Gringotts, he felt a sense of helplessness. "We need to deploy more manpower. The crowd is swelling." Fudge, witnessing the gathering throngs, felt a bead of sweat form on his brow. The goblins had denied Rohir's and all other wizards' requests to withdraw money, citing damage to Gringotts' underground vaults that rendered many inaccessible and in need of repair. This explanation did little to quell the anger of the incited crowd, who found the goblins' reasoning unsatisfactory. If not for the presence of beaters and aurors, a violent confrontation would have likely ensued. To prevent any altercations, goblin guards fortified Gringotts, while aurors and beaters formed a protective barrier around the bank, even blocking streets leading to it. Despite these measures, the public's fury only intensified, fueled by sensational articles in the Daily Prophet. Fudge's visit to the Daily Prophet's headquarters ended in frustration as he realized that Grindelwald's influence left him with few options. That evening, Lance hastily exited Gringotts and boarded a carriage drawn by Thestrals, a necessary precaution given the lack of teleportation facilities within Gringotts for security reasons. Meanwhile, in the shadows of Diagon Alley, several figures emerged. "Report back that Lance is on the move. We'll find a way to track him." In Nurmengard, Grindelwald, delighted with a new revolver, was informed of Lance's departure from Gringotts. "My people are on his trail," he boasted, confident in his network's ability to uncover the identity of those plotting against him, though Blake doubted their ability to track the cunning goblin. Blake, preparing to leave, expressed his intention to return to Hogwarts and report to Dumbledore, suspecting that the headmaster was filled with questions. Despite Grindelwald's wish for him to stay longer, Blake was determined to leave, skeptical of Grindelwald's assurance that his agents could keep pace with Lance. He knew too well the lengths to which some organizations would go to avoid detection, including erasing goblins' memories after contact, making casual tracking nearly impossible. Shortly after, another owl returned with a message. Upon reading it, Grindelwald's expression turned grim. "We've lost," he said, a tone of resignation in his voice. "Now, how can we ascertain if the goblins were involved in your attack?" "There's no need to pursue them further. The organization that's been falsely accused will never confess to stealing the gold, and the goblins, suspecting deceit, will only see their denials as lies. Trust me, this will lead to conflict. As long as there's unrest, they won't be able to act covertly," Blake explained, though he harbored doubts about his own theory. He was aware that the so-called wronged organization was actually the fourth natural disaster. If the goblins were indeed after Chaos Wish, it was only a matter of time before they came after the fourth natural disaster. Blake was prepared to wait for Chaos Wish to seek retribution against the fourth natural disaster over this incident. By intervening then, Blake could achieve what he had promised Grindelwald. "All right. I hope things unfold as you've predicted. Otherwise, our efforts in targeting the goblins would have been in vain," Grindelwald conceded. Blake offered a reassuring smile. "How can you say it's all for nothing? Even if this endeavor doesn't yield the answers we seek, can't we still seize the opportunity to win over the public's heart?" Grindelwald scratched his head, somewhat perplexed. I'm not concerned about my own reputation. What bothers me is figuring out who's trying to harm you. Catching the intense look of animosity in Blake's eyes, Grindelwald hastily added, I mean, of course, I won't turn away the fame that comes knocking. Don't worry, in a few days, I'll step in and lend money to Gringotts. This exchange highlighted their strategy moving forward, blending a mix of patience and cunning. Grindelwald's concern for Blake's safety was evident, yet both understood the importance of maintaining their influence and reputation amidst the magical community. Their plan to intervene financially with Gringotts was a calculated move to position themselves as benefactors, furthering their agenda under the guise of generosity. Chapter 473, Brother, You Smell So Good. Upon Blake's return to Hogwarts for the first time since his recent adventures, he found himself in Dumbledore's office. The headmaster, who had been perusing the Daily Prophet, set aside the newspaper and regarded Blake with a mix of concern and admiration. To be honest, the actions you and Grindelwald undertook were rather extreme, Dumbledore began, his voice tinged with a complicated mix of emotions. However, as I've mentioned before, I won't interfere with your decisions, and my stance remains unchanged. Blake offered a small, knowing smile. Of course, Professor, we were well aware that you wouldn't simply stand by without taking any action. Dumbledore sighed, a hint of resignation in his voice. So, I was part of your calculations as well? Yes, Blake confirmed without hesitation, causing Dumbledore to look at him with a mixture of surprise and respect. After a moment of contemplation, Dumbledore spoke again. It appears you've grown significantly in your abilities, and I'm relieved to see you haven't lost your way. Knowing this gives me peace of mind for the future. Blake's strategy had meticulously accounted for various reactions, from the goblin's reverence for wealth to Dumbledore's proactive measures to mitigate any fallout. At such a young age, Blake had already achieved feats that many would consider miraculous. Your trust in me is appreciated, Professor. I assure you, I won't become the person you fear I might, Blake said earnestly. Dumbledore nodded, a gesture of acceptance and encouragement. Very well, then. You should get some rest. I imagine last night was hardly restful for you. Blake's smile widened. Actually, Professor, last night brought an unexpected discovery. Intrigued, Dumbledore asked, and what might that be? Blake reached into his pocket and carefully placed Hufflepuff's golden cup on Dumbledore's desk. The headmaster's eyes widened in surprise before he picked up the artifact, examining it closely. This is indeed Hufflepuff's golden cup, but as you can see, it's been tarnished, much like Ravenclaw's diadem. Dumbledore's examination was thorough, his nose nearly brushing against the cup as he scrutinized the dark magic corrupting it. This complex curse, it's unmistakably Tom Riddle's handiwork. Which means you've found another Horcrux, Dumbledore exclaimed, his eyes lighting up with a mixture of joy and determination. The discovery of another Horcrux was a significant victory in the fight against Voldemort, bringing them one step closer to eradicating the Dark Lord's influence. Where did you come across this? Dumbledore inquired, his mood visibly lifted by the news. Blake glanced at the oil paintings of former headmasters and headmistresses lining the walls of the office, hesitating. The painted figures were all looking at him with keen interest, eager to hear of his latest feat. However, Blake was reluctant to divulge the details in their presence, aware that the specifics of their mission, especially their infiltration of Gringotts, were sensitive. Sensing Blake's hesitation, Dumbledore quickly cast a soundproofing charm around them, ensuring their conversation remained private. The portraits looked on with disappointment, their curiosity unsatisfied. Last night, we explored several vaults, and found this cup in the Lestrange family's vault, Blake revealed, keeping his voice low. As far as I'm aware, the vault belongs to Bellatrix Lestrange, who is currently imprisoned in Azkaban. Dumbledore nodded, understanding the significance. That makes sense. Tom Riddle often entrusted his Horcruxes to his most loyal followers for safekeeping. The vaults of Gringotts, a clever, albeit risky, hiding place. He then retrieved a collection of damaged artifacts from a drawer, a diary, a diadem, and a locket. With this latest find, we've made significant progress in our quest to destroy Voldemort's Horcruxes. Blake carefully placed the golden cup next to the designated area, his mind heavy with the weight of their mission. It's difficult to ascertain the exact number of Horcruxes he created. Had Gryffindor's sword not been in our possession, I would have suspected he used it as well, Blake mused. I'll continue to track down his Horcruxes, don't worry. By examining his life closely, I'm confident we'll soon make significant progress. He's too arrogant, and arrogance often leads to mistakes, Dumbledore remarked, his tone tinged with complexity. Blake, you've performed admirably. In truth, this is a task I should have undertaken myself. After leaving Dumbledore's office, Blake felt a sense of accomplishment. Dumbledore's mood had visibly improved, no longer dwelling on the questionable actions Blake and Grindelwald had taken. As usual, Dumbledore had entrusted the Golden Cup to Blake. Given the late hour, Blake opted not to return to his dormitory, instead heading straight for the room of requirement. Neither Hermione nor Cassandra were present. Settling down, he placed the Golden Cup on the desk once more. After a moment of contemplation, Blake effortlessly extracted the remaining soul fragment from the Golden Cup using legilimency. Dealing with Voldemort's residual soul had become a tiresome game to him. Despite scouring the soul's memories, Blake discovered nothing new and subsequently immobilized the soul fragment in mid-air. He then retrieved a small box containing the lich. The soul fragment thrashed about wildly, sensing imminent danger, yet it was powerless to escape or even emit a sound. Blake opened the box, and the lich emerged, its presence commanding yet silent. I promised you a reward, Blake said with a smile. The lich remained still, its gaze fixed on Blake. See that? That could be considered your kin, Blake continued, gesturing towards the suspended soul fragment. This is your reward. You know what to do, right? Feeding a lich undead essence was the fastest way to strengthen it. Blake had no intention of offering other undead souls to Tom for the time being, but using Tom's own soul fragment seemed perfectly acceptable. Blake felt a twinge of regret for having previously destroyed certain artifacts too hastily. Without hesitation, the lich accepted Blake's command, transforming into a black mist that enveloped the struggling soul fragment. Lich Tom let out a growl and bit into the black mist, consuming a portion of the soul fragment. For the first time, its pale face contorted into an expression of sheer delight. Brother, you taste exquisite. Chapter 474, Blake's New Punching Bag. Towering snow-capped mountains pierced the sky, their majestic peaks overseeing a dense forest below. From the heavens, a carriage emerged, descending gracefully into the forest and landing softly on the ground. Master Lance, we have arrived. However, there seems to be nothing here. The goblin coachman, perched on the driver's seat and guiding several Yeji, spoke with caution. The carriage door swung open, revealing Lance, impeccably dressed. He surveyed his surroundings before stepping out decisively. This is precisely where I need to be. Don't concern yourself with the details. Return for me at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, Lance instructed, dismissing the goblin coachman. In goblin society, hierarchy and status play significant roles. The coachman, of lower status, dared not question Lance further, especially under his intimidating gaze. With a nod, he steered the Yeji-drawn carriage back into the sky. Lance watched the carriage vanish into the clouds before turning his attention to the surrounding landscape. He began his trek through the snow-laden forest, each step a struggle against the deep snow. Gradually, the dense woods thinned, and the snow-covered path transformed into a solid dirt road. Lance's calm demeanor gave way to anxiety. I was certain it was here. Have I misremembered? He pondered aloud, frustration mounting with each step. Just as he was about to abandon his quest, the ground beneath him morphed into a swirling vortex. Caught off guard, Lance plummeted into the abyss, his scream cut short as he abruptly landed. Regaining his bearings, Lance realized the environment had drastically changed. The once barren forest was now engulfed in darkness, an endless void where light dared not tread. What brings you here? An androgynous voice echoed from the shadows, its origin indiscernible. Lance, heart-pounding, mustered his courage. I seek Locke, he replied, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. In this realm, brevity was survival. Wait, the voice commanded, plunging the surroundings back into silence. Time seemed to stand still, the oppressive atmosphere weighing heavily on Lance. Suddenly, footsteps approached from behind. Lance whirled around to face a tall goblin, his regal attire cutting an imposing figure against the darkness. "Lance, I've made it clear that you are not to seek me out unless Gringotts faces a dire crisis," the goblin Locke stated, his height notable even among his kind. Intimidated, Lance bowed deeply. "Yes, President Locke. Only a matter of great urgency would compel me to come," he affirmed. Locke's impatience was palpable. "Explain." Lance recounted the events succinctly: the robbery at Gringotts, the stolen vaults, the remnants of the attack, and Grindelwald's involvement. Locke listened intently, his expression turning into a frown. "You disturbed me for this trivial matter?" he questioned, disbelief evident in his tone. Lance stared at Locke, shocked. The theft of numerous vaults and the chaos it had unleashed on Gringotts were anything but trivial. Yet to Locke, it seemed insignificant. "Isn't this a minor issue? You could have allowed Gringotts to make an advance payment to preserve its reputation instead of coming directly to me." Lance's voice quivered as he summoned the courage to speak. "Advance payment? But, President Locke, the treasury of even the smallest pureblood family contains at least 500,000 gold galleons, and that's just the smallest. We've lost 10 of such treasuries. Are we truly expected to cover all these in advance?" Lance continued, his voice laced with concern. "Indeed, we have the capability to make advance payments, but doing so would result in substantial losses for us. Moreover, there's no need for us to rush into paying." Lance glanced up tentatively at Locke, his implication clear. With the culprits known, why not demand they return the stolen wealth? Even if they don't return everything, any amount recovered would reduce Gringotts' financial loss. Locke felt a pang of distress upon hearing about the vast sums of money involved. However, his primary concern wasn't the financial loss, but the blow to Gringotts' reputation. "You may go now. I'm informed," Locke stated, his tone final. Lance nodded, understanding Locke's intent. He was confident Locke would confront the thieves wielding Muggle weapons and negotiate the return of the stolen gold. As long as the gold was recovered, Gringotts could weather this storm. Lance believed a few days' delay was manageable, never doubting Locke's ability to succeed. Locke had always been infallible. As Lance pondered this, the scenery around him shifted dramatically, and he found himself back in the vast snowy forest, the previous conversation feeling like a distant dream. Meanwhile, Hermione scrutinized the parchment before her frustration evident. Blake watched her struggle and attempted to offer some encouragement. "How's it going? Have you figured it out yet?" "Shut up! I'm trying to concentrate!" Hermione snapped, her patience wearing thin. After a few more minutes of futile effort, she dropped the parchment, feeling defeated. "Without the soul lantern, I'm utterly lost. I can't make heads or tails of this alchemical formula." Blake tried to console her. "You're being too hard on yourself." Hermione felt a slight ease from Blake's words until he added, "Truthfully, even with the soul lantern, you'd still struggle to understand this formula." The quill in Hermione's hand snapped from her grip. "Was it necessary to add that last bit? Are you implying I'm hopeless even with the lantern?" Blake quickly clarified. "No, that's not what I meant. You're just rushing into advanced topics too quickly. It's like with Muggle mathematics. You need to master the basics before moving on to more complex subjects." Feeling helpless, Hermione tossed aside the broken quill. "And how did you learn it? You've been studying alchemy for less than 2 years, right?" Blake corrected her. "Not exactly. I've been studying it for quite some time." Hermione was incredulous. "You mean you've been secretly studying it? You knew alchemy even when you were at Madame Marion's?" Blake held up 2 fingers solemnly. "I've been practicing for 2.5 years. Hermione turned away, frustrated. To her, Blake's rapid mastery of alchemy, something that might take others a lifetime to learn, in just 2.5 years was both astounding and infuriating. Blake, sensing her frustration, tried to lighten the mood. "I only wanted to impress you, not drive you away." Hermione responded with a stern face. "I'm sorry, but I really don't think I can match your level of expertise." "Appreciate you," Hermione began, her voice trailing off in discomfort. "Don't be like this, Hermione. How about I give you a massage? My technique is very professional. Everyone who has tried it says it's good." Blake offered, rolling up his sleeves with a grin. "Don't. Go away." Hermione protested weakly. "How about you try it first?" Blake suggested, undeterred. "Ahem. Cassandra, standing next to Hermione, coughed loudly to draw attention. "This is the first time I've seen someone so blatantly talk about taking advantage as if it's a virtue," she said, pinching her waist and glaring at Blake. "Blake Green, to do this in front of me, do you think it's appropriate?" Blake smiled cheekily and replied, "I think it's quite suitable. In fact, it's extremely suitable." Why are you such a scumbag? If only you could be more focused. That would be great," Cassandra lamented. "No, Cassandra, if I were too dedicated, many girls would be sad. I hate seeing girls sad the most, so I have to let myself be a bit of a scumbag. Hey, only those who know me well understand that this is what true brotherhood is," Blake explained with feigned seriousness. "Bah! Shameless!" Cassandra and Hermione exclaimed in unison, their anger culminating in a synchronized kick towards Blake. A faint blue light flashed, and the Phoenix girl appeared before Blake. She tilted her head curiously, observing the standoff between Blake and the two girls. Blake coughed awkwardly and calmly brushed off the two distinct shoe prints on his body. He then took a letter from the Phoenix girl's mouth. After quickly scanning the letter, Blake's previously playful expression turned grave. The letter was from Old Lep, informing Blake that Chaos Wish had contacted him, the temporary leader of the fourth natural disaster, through previously agreed-upon channels. They inquired about the Gringotts robbery and demanded the return of the stolen gold, with a tone that left no room for negotiation. It was clear they had already concluded that the fourth natural disaster was responsible for the heist. Blake realized the goblins must have a significant relationship with Chaos Wish. Despite witnessing the strength of the fourth natural disaster, Chaos Wish still demanded the return of the gold with unwavering confidence. This suggested that the organization's backing was formidable. Feeling a surge of excitement, Blake recognized that Chaos Wish could be the formidable opponent he had been seeking. The last time he felt this thrill was when he encountered a powerful vampire, who now served as a unique item in Blake's collection, occasionally used for experiments. "What's wrong with you? Why are you smiling so evilly?" Cassandra inquired, puzzled by the sudden change in Blake's demeanor. Blake touched his face, feigning innocence. "Am I smiling evilly?" "Yes, just like the villains in Quibbler novels," Cassandra observed. "Ha ha! Is there a possibility that I am actually a villain?" Blake joked, his smile widening as he approached Cassandra and Hermione. Upon learning of the goblins' affiliation with the attackers, Blake promptly informed Grindelwald. With confirmation of the goblins' allegiance to their adversaries, Grindelwald wasted no time in escalating the situation. Controlling the Daily Prophet, he launched a fierce public opinion campaign. Within just 2 days, Fudge and Gringotts experienced the full wrath of public discontent, a testament to the power of the media in the wizarding world. The wizards who had once besieged Gringotts were now caught in a storm of their own making, orchestrated by Grindelwald's strategic manipulation of information. Diagon Alley, once bustling with life, had become a battleground. The Aurors and enforcers stationed densely around Gringotts were besieged daily by an increasingly agitated crowd. Without Dumbledore's magical protections, they would have been overwhelmed in mere days, trampled underfoot by the sheer force of the masses. Yet, even with such defenses, they felt like a solitary boat amidst a stormy sea, at risk of capsizing at any moment. The turmoil wasn't confined to the UK alone. Gringotts branches worldwide faced similar upheavals. Wizards everywhere, driven by fear and uncertainty, rushed to withdraw their treasures, haunted by the nightmare of losing their wealth, as had happened to some in England. Amidst this chaos, Grindelwald made a surprising announcement. To ensure the establishment of welfare institutions wasn't jeopardized, he would urgently withdraw a significant amount of money from his vault in Gringotts, Austria. This fund was to be directed towards setting up these institutions, starting with an advance payment in gold galleons to the goblins for those unable to access their assets in Gringotts. The catch was that these individuals had to sign a magical contract overseen by the Ministry of Magic, transferring their Gringotts property to Grindelwald. Initially met with skepticism, people gradually began to participate, and soon a flood of wizards sought assistance from the newly established welfare institution. In just 3 hours, and with minimal losses, Grindelwald managed to place the goblins of Gringotts in his debt, amassing a considerable sum. However, when certain pureblood families sought to apply, Grindelwald firmly denied them, citing the limited resources of the welfare institutions and the need to prioritize those in dearest need. This decision significantly bolstered Grindelwald's standing among many in the wizarding community, particularly those who harbored resentment towards the haughty pure-blood families. In a matter of days, Grindelwald's public image underwent a dramatic transformation. Even attempts to remind the public of his past crimes were lost in a sea of newfound support and approval. Chapter 475, The Treasure Trove Dilemma. In the central conference room of the 4th Disaster Base, tension and anticipation hung in the air. Ariana, with a curious glint in her eye, inquired, "How did Blake respond?" Old Lep, puffing on his large pipe, passed the letter to Ariana. "We've firmly denied involvement. Truthfully, it wasn't our doing." Ariana quickly scanned the letter, her expression a mix of disappointment and intrigue. "I wish he had implicated us. After all, it's a goblin's treasury we're talking about. Who wouldn't be tempted to raid it? If they insist on blaming us, as Blake suggests, the Chaos Wish Group won't back down easily," she mused. Old Lep, confidence radiating from him, patted the alchemy equipment adorning his attire. "Let them come. We're not defenseless." The members of the 4th Disaster had been arming themselves to the teeth, taking advantage of Grindelwald's recent preoccupations and his absence from the base. Their boldness had grown, as had their readiness for confrontation. "I believe Blake has been itching for a worthy opponent," Ariana speculated. Old Lep chuckled. "True strength comes with an inherent aggression, a desire to confront and overcome. It's only when one realizes the potential harm of their violence that they might restrain themselves." He continued, "Grindelwald, Blake, even Dumbledore in his youth shared this trait. Your brother, however, learned to temper his aggression after enduring great hardships." Ariana shrugged off the concern. "I'm not worried about a fight. Why should I be?" Surprised, Old Lep asked, "You're considering joining the fray?" "Why not? With the cloak, I'll be unrecognizable," Ariana replied with a smile. Before their conversation could continue, a thunderous dragon roar echoed from behind the base, causing Old Lep to grimace. "Ah, it seems our guest is awake." The Ukrainian Ironbelly, previously injured and now recuperating at their base, had proven to be a formidable and vicious creature. Subduing it had been no small feat for Old Lep. "I should have mentioned it to Blake," he muttered. Ariana stood, determined. "Let me handle it." "You? Train a dragon?" Old Lep was incredulous. "I've picked up a few tricks from Blake," Ariana said with a hint of confidence. Meanwhile, the situation in Diagon Alley had begun to stabilize, thanks to Grindelwald's strategic distribution of resources. The siege had ended, and the Aurors and Strikers, who had been on high alert, could finally relax. Tonks, exhausted, collapsed onto the ground, embodying the fatigue felt by all. Moody, however, remained vigilant, his body having recovered significantly. "Tonks, follow me," he commanded, heading to the Auror office to report. Tonks, barely able to keep her eyes open, protested weakly but followed. Moody, observing the worn-out state of his colleagues, decided to let them rest. "You all can stay here. I'll handle the report." The promise of rest was met with cheers, but Moody couldn't help feeling a pang of disappointment at the current state of the Aurors, a stark contrast to the resilience he remembered from his younger days. Lance paused mid-sentence, his attention suddenly captured by the unusual activity at Gringotts. A number of fully armed goblins were emerging from the bank, and soon after, dozens of carriages, each pulled by a creature known as Yeji, took to the sky. Lance was the first to board a carriage, followed closely by the goblin guards. Together, the fleet of carriages soared eastward, their departure not going unnoticed by the Aurors stationed nearby. "What are these goblins up to?" Tonks wondered aloud, her confusion evident. Moody, with his usual sharpness, speculated they might have discovered the true culprits behind the theft of their treasury. He then turned to his colleagues. "Rest here for now. I'll seek further instructions and decide our next steps." Tonks, surprised, reminded him, "But you just said we could rest." Moody shot her a helpless look. "With the goblins marching out in full armor, do you really think they're just heading out for a leisurely outing? Think about it. A conflict seems inevitable. If you were hoping for rest, it might be out of reach now. Tonks, head to Green's potion store and pick up some energy-boosting potions for everyone. You can get reimbursed by the ministry later. Delix, find out what's happening with the goblins at Gringotts. After Moody disappeared with a pop, Tonks, though reluctant, made her way to Grimm's potion shop, located just 2 blocks from Gringotts. Upon entering, the bell above the door jingled, announcing her arrival. The shop was quiet, with only 2 people inside, the store manager, who had a notably somber expression, and Blake. "Blake, what brings you here?" Tonks asked, surprised to see him. Blake, equally surprised, responded, "Senior Tonks? What a coincidence. But as you can see, I'm in my own potion shop. It's not unusual for me to be here, is it?" Tonks, skeptical, pointed out, "But Hogwarts isn't on holiday, and it's not even the weekend. Your presence here is quite suspicious." Blake met her gaze calmly, his blue eyes betraying no sign of panic. "Sister, you know I can teleport. It's quite convenient for me to come and go as I please." Changing the subject, Blake asked, "So, what brings you here? What potion do you need?" Tonks, her energy waning, explained, "We thought we could finally rest, but then the goblins armed themselves and left. Moody thinks we can't rest just yet, so I'm here to buy some refreshing potions for everyone." Blake signaled to Alan to prepare the potions. "You've been working hard, senior sister, but don't worry, our potions are highly effective and will rejuvenate you in no time." Tonks sighed. "I know your potions work wonders, but sometimes it's not just physical exhaustion that weighs on us. It's been a tough few days." Blake, feigning casual interest, inquired about the goblins' departure. "They went east, fully armed? Moody thinks they found the thief?" Understanding dawned on him as he received the bag of potions from Alan. "Take care, Senior. The ministry will cover the cost." "Don't worry about the payment. We'll settle it with the Ministry of Magic. You're always welcome here," Blake assured her as she left, her mind heavy with the day's events and the tasks that lay ahead. "Visit us next time," Blake said with a warm smile. "I know you sneaked out. Don't stay outside too long. It's not safe out there now," Tonks advised before leaving the green potion store. After watching Tonks depart, Blake murmured to himself, "It seems those guys have decided to use the goblins as cannon fodder by not stepping in themselves. Ha, what great allies they are. Alan, send a message back, informing them that they've been duped and are now heading to the decoy base #1 we intentionally leaked. Give them a good thrashing," Blake instructed. "And make sure a few goblins manage to escape. We need messengers to spread the word on our behalf. Call me again when the Chaos Wish members arrive," he added. Following the establishment of the welfare institutions, the first order of business was to transfer funds to Gringotts. This gesture not only indebted the goblins to Grindelwald with a favor and a substantial amount of gold galleons, but also alleviated any suspicions regarding the sudden emergence of a welfare institution. Consequently, this paved the way for smoother operations for the welfare agency. Initially, recruitment proved challenging due to the organization being associated with Grindelwald, despite the generous compensation offered. However, following this incident, individuals who harbored doubts now flocked to the welfare agency to submit their applications. Within a single day, the agency filled hundreds of positions. 2 nights after the recruitment drive, Grindelwald hosted a banquet for all the new employees, who had been meticulously vetted by Rocher to ensure they were young individuals with clean financial records and no potential for being undercover agents. Additionally, many influential figures from the wizarding world were invited. The presence of Minister of Magic Fudge was expected, but the attendance of Dumbledore was a surprise to many. This lent further credibility to Grindelwald's welfare institutions. The employees' lingering doubts vanished completely, reassured by the attendance of such prominent figures. The banquet proceeded smoothly, with a warm and inviting atmosphere. The absence of certain pure-blood families who had been denied withdrawal requests went unnoticed and unremarked upon. After a while, Grindelwald, holding a wine glass, approached Dumbledore, who stood alone by the window. "I didn't expect you to accept my invitation. I thought you'd ignore it like those pure-blood families," Grindelwald remarked with a smile. Dumbledore replied, "Blake wanted me to come, and, despite your possible ulterior motives, you've done something good, and it ended well." Grindelwald scoffed lightly. "So now, I'm seen as a good person in your eyes, yet you still hold resentment towards me. My actions are not defined by my intentions. If I can bring benefits to others, isn't that sufficient? Dumbledore responded calmly. That's precisely why I'm here tonight. Grindelwald, you've disappointed me in the past, but now, don't let Blake down, Dumbledore advised. Grindelwald smiled. He won't be disappointed. I will fulfill whatever he asks of me. With that, he left Dumbledore's side and took the stage. Friends, brothers, sisters, Grindelwald began, addressing the crowd. I'm delighted you could join us tonight. It's heartening to see so many exceptional young people eager to be part of our team and share in our vision. Most of you are aware of who I am and the mistakes I've made in the past. As you can see, I've paid a steep price for my sins. Yet, there are those who believe the price wasn't high enough, wishing for my immediate damnation. I once shared that sentiment, but then a young man convinced me that the transformative power of reforming a villain far exceeds the immediate gratification of defeating them, he argued. I countered, skeptical, I don't buy it. He challenged me then, aren't you skilled? Aren't you wealthy? Use your resources for good, and you'll see the truth in my words. Puzzled, I asked, what should I do with my wealth? Grindelwald gestured expansively. What followed is history. That was the birth of the welfare institution. On the inaugural day of the institution, I invested my fortune into what I believed was a noble cause. I soon realized the young man was correct. I had made the right choice. Consider this. Had I met my end as planned, the Daily Prophet might have merely noted the demise of Gellert Grindelwald, a dark wizard who had finally met his just end. Or worse, my passing might have gone unreported. But now, the Daily Prophet frequently heralds my philanthropy, noting how my donations have uplifted hundreds of wizarding families. Curious about the identity of the young man who inspired me? He asked with a smile. I'll spare you the suspense. His name is Blake Green, the youngest ever to receive the Order of Merlin, first class. Meanwhile, in Hogwarts' Room of Requirement, Blake Green furrowed his brow at the sight of an overwhelming number of high-quality treasure chests appearing in his system space. He was plunged into deep contemplation. With such an endless array of chests, it was impossible to open them all. Chapter 476, The Unseen Barrier. Are you sure this is the right place? Lance peered out of the carriage window, his gaze sweeping across the vast, unending desert. Not a single tree broke the monotony of the sand. Yes, this is the exact location marked on Master Locke's map, the goblin guard serving as the coachman responded with respect. Lance's brow furrowed in confusion. But there's not even a single building in sight. Could it be that they're all hidden underground? The goblin coachman offered a thoughtful point. Master Lance, consider this. Do you think there's any desert like this in England? Realizing the logic in the goblin's words, Lance fell silent. They had followed the map's coordinates directly to this spot. It had to be the hideout of the robbers they were after. With a wave of his hand, Lance signaled the driver to land. The leading carriage descended, and the others followed suit, a dozen carriages dropping from the sky into the sand. As the carriages landed, their wheels sank deep into the soft sand. The goblins disembarked cautiously, surveying their surroundings, while the creatures pulling the carriages, sensing the tension, neighed uneasily. Lance surveyed the desert with a frown. Even the ordinary goblin guards could sense the absurdity of a desert's presence here. Robbers would typically ensure their stronghold was secure and inconspicuous. Creating such a noticeable desert seemed like an odd choice. What were these robbers thinking? Master Lance? The goblin guards, noticing Lance lost in thought, gently prodded him for instructions. Let's head to the center, to 210, and see what we find, Lance decided with a serious tone. Mr. Lance, the sand makes walking difficult. Wouldn't it be better to continue by carriage? The goblins, with their short stature, found the soft sand particularly challenging. Each step required them to laboriously free their feet from the sand's grip. No, we continue on foot. If we're targeted with a large-scale spell like an explosion, we won't be able to dodge in time, Lance reasoned. Reluctantly, the goblins left the carriages behind. Despite the difficulty of walking on sand, it was preferable to the risk of being unable to escape an attack while confined to a carriage. They spread out in a battle formation, advancing slowly and painstakingly toward the desert's center. The journey was arduous, and after more than 10 minutes, they'd only covered a few hundred meters. "Mr. Lance, is it just me, or is it getting hotter?" one of the goblins inquired, wiping sweat from his brow. Lance, feeling the increasing heat himself, paused to consider their situation. The desert was proving to be more challenging than anticipated, and the heat seemed to intensify the deeper they ventured. It was as if they were approaching a source of fire. After a moment of thought, Lance halted the group with a gesture. He raised his right hand, sending a beam of red light shooting forward. The beam abruptly halted, as if hitting an invisible wall, then vanished without a trace. However, the air where the spell impacted vibrated violently. Shocked by this discovery, Lance prepared for a more concerted effort. He rallied the goblins for a combined attack. "Now!" he commanded. Together, they unleashed their magic toward the unseen barrier. The air trembled under the assault of their combined spells. The next moment, the invisible barrier that had been concealing the true nature of their surroundings began to shimmer into visibility, revealing the air wall, which had been transparent, suddenly lost its clarity, transforming into something resembling a cracked mirror. Gradually, the crack marks spread across the mirror until, with a sharp crack, it shattered and vanished. What lay before Lance and the fairies was no longer the vast sea of sand they had been traversing, but a blazing lake of lava. Lance stared in shock at the transformation. The sea of sand had been an illusion, a trap designed to ensnare the unwary. Had he not seen through the illusion, several the goblins leading the way would have unwittingly stepped into the magma. "Back off!" Lance ordered, his brow furrowed in concern. "Return to the carriage, and send a Yeji carriage for aerial reconnaissance." Upon hearing Lance's command, the goblins couldn't help but shrink back. Being a scout in this treacherous terrain, filled with unknown dangers, was a perilous task. They hesitated, their reluctance clear in their eyes. Lance silently cursed their selfishness. If only they could show a bit more unity, especially in these times of conflict between goblins and wizards, where the outcome was so uncertain. As the goblins turned to head back towards the carriages, a sudden rustling sound emanated from the direction of the sun. They quickly scanned their surroundings. "Underground! There's something moving underground," one of the goblins shouted in panic. Lance observed the sand around them and noticed ridges forming, as if something was indeed burrowing beneath. "Load your arrows with explosives and target the ground," he commanded. Despite their fear, the fairy guards quickly complied, and soon the air was filled with the sound of explosions. Boom! Boom! The arrows detonated, sending clouds of fine yellow sand into the air. The visibility was severely reduced, turning the area into a dangerous, obscured battlefield. "Stop! Clear the dust!" Lance began, but his order was cut short by the screams of goblins all around him. "Ah, what is this? My leg! Something's biting me!" The cries of pain and terror filled the air. Under Lance's direction, the goblins regrouped, which immediately reduced the number of attacks. They even managed to rescue an injured comrade, whose legs were badly wounded and bleeding profusely. The injured goblin was delirious, screaming about monsters. "What monster? Describe it!" Lance demanded urgently. But the goblin's face turned a sickly purple, and he soon lost consciousness, muttering about the monster's poisonous teeth. "Has anyone seen it? What does this monster look like?" Lance pressed, his voice tense with concern. "Master Lance, over there," a goblin pointed out with a trembling voice. Lance followed the direction indicated, and his heart skipped a beat. Emerging from the sand not far away was a group of monstrous creatures unlike any he had ever seen. They had the heads of crocodiles, the upper bodies of lions, and the lower bodies of hippopotamuses. Lance, despite his extensive experience, had never encountered such beings. These creatures were not native to their world. They were mythical beasts from ancient Egyptian mythology, brought back by Blake from the otherworld. Under Blake's care, these creatures had proliferated and were now being tested as weapons for the Fourth Scourge. The effectiveness of these creatures in battle was now being demonstrated in a terrifying manner. At Lance's command, the goblins readied their most powerful arrows and launched a volley at the advancing monsters. The sound of arrows clinking against the tough hides of the creatures filled the air. a desperate attempt to fend off the deadly threat. The crisp sounds of breaking echoed through the air. Lance was astounded to discover that his magic arrows, capable of penetrating the defenses of the most fortified vaults, were utterly ineffective against the scales of the monstrous creatures before him. It was only as the creatures charged, their scales gleaming with a metallic sheen under the sunlight, that Lance realized they were armored in a material he couldn't identify. Without hesitation, Lance turned on his heel and fled, shouting commands over his shoulder. "Explosive arrows! Slow them down! Let's retreat! Retreat!" Behind him, the air was filled with the screams of the less fortunate, but Lance dared not look back, focusing only on reaching Yeji's carriage. He had never imagined that a few hundred meters could feel so interminably long. By the time he reached the carriage, the screams had mostly ceased. Lance clambered inside and seized the reins, but before he could urge the carriage forward, the night beasts had already taken to the skies, their attention diverted. Lance let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Only then did he dare to glance back and understand his narrow escape. Most of the monsters were preoccupied with devouring the corpses of the fallen fairies, allowing him and a few others to escape. With trembling hands, Lance steered Yeji back along the return path, accompanied by several other carriages. He was not the only survivor. Glancing at the terrified goblins in the nearby carriages, Lance's heart sank as he realized that of the more than 100 goblin guards he had led into this perilous desert, fewer than 20 remained. They hadn't even encountered their primary adversary, and yet their numbers were already decimated. Amidst his sorrow, Lance found a small comfort in the thought that the monsters could not pursue them through the air. However, this relief was short-lived. A thunderous dragon roar from behind shattered the illusion of safety. Lance turned just in time to see a gray-white Ukrainian ironbelly, its eyes burning with unbridled fury and hatred, rapidly closing in on them. How is this possible? Lance recognized the dragon as the guardian beast of Gringotts, believed to be blind and securely contained deep underground. Yet here it was, unleashing havoc. Before Lance could process the shock, the dragon incinerated the rearmost carriage with a blast of fire. The screams intensified as another carriage was destroyed, some goblins choosing to leap to their deaths rather than face the dragon's wrath. Amidst the chaos, Lance caught sight of a cloaked figure riding the dragon, directing its fury. Meanwhile, at Hogwarts, Blake sat disinterestedly on a bench, the letter from the goblins in his hand. He was unimpressed by their performance. A mere group of low-level amuts had decimated their ranks, and those attempting to flee by air were utterly defenseless. If not for his command to spare a few, none would have survived. The disparity between his preparations and the goblin's ability to withstand even the first challenge left him feeling hollow. "You are so weak. Are you worthy of the barriers I have deliberately set?" he mused to himself, unnoticed by those around him. Blake then made his way to a secluded flower garden, where he opened a dimensional door and stepped through, arriving at the base of the fourth natural disaster. As he appeared in the square, a Ukrainian ironbelly descended from the sky, marking the beginning of a new chapter in this unforeseen conflict. Landing not far from him, a figure dismounted from the back of a fire dragon. "Good girl. Well done," Ariana exclaimed, patting the dragon's scales with excitement. The Ukrainian ironbelly responded with a few growls, seemingly in conversation. "I didn't expect you to actually tame it," Blake remarked, clearly impressed. Ariana smiled. "This is something you taught me. Well, not the you are now." "So, we've known each other for a long time?" Blake inquired. "Of course, but you were different back then, almost as if you never aged," Ariana replied nonchalantly. Blake raised an eyebrow. "Oh," Ariana continued, "those goblins were incredibly weak. I can't fathom why it took so long to quell their rebellion." She then added, "I must thank you, though, for your healing magic. It restored Kate's eyesight." Blake glanced at the fire dragon. "Kelly, you named her?" Ariana nodded. "Does it sound good?" Blake touched his nose, a bit unsure. "It sounds good." He was never good at naming, his choices usually being quite simplistic. "Don't forget the armor you promised Kelly," Ariana reminded him. "Don't worry," Blake reassured her with a wave of his hand. Ariana mounted the fire dragon, now named Kelly, and took to the skies once more. She had decided to make the back mountain Kelly's new home. Old Rip materialized beside Blake, puffing on a large pipe. He watched Ariana's departure and remarked, "Your family is remarkable. Train, owning a dragon as a pet is truly astonishing." Blake responded, "Of course, Aunt Ariana's potential was immense. Without the Obscurus, she might have rivaled Professor Dumbledore." Changing the subject, Blake asked, "How are things over there now?" Old Rip smiled. "It's been taken care of. We're just waiting for the rightful owner to return." Blake warned, "Don't let your guard down. If those Chaos Wish members have survived this long, they must have something up their sleeve." Old Rip sighed, recalling Blake's previous warnings about the goblins. Blake remained silent, pondering why the fairies were so weak. He hoped the Chaos Wish members would prove to be more resilient. Chapter 477, A Dire Warning and a Narrow Escape. Blake harbored a silent critique of the goblin's frailty before turning his attention to more pressing matters. He handed a small bag to Old Lep, his expression grave. "Give this to Ariana later. The contents might save her in a dire moment, and remind her to be more vigilant about her safety than usual." Old Lep, taken aback, voiced his concern. "Is she in danger?" "It's highly likely." Blake replied with a seriousness that brooked no argument. Chaos Wish is still in the dark about the location of the 4th Natural Disasters base. However, they've caught wind of the security company run by Ariana's aunt, under which we've concealed our operations. If I were in their shoes, I wouldn't overlook any lead. Bringing Ariana in for questioning would be a calculated risk on their part, especially if there's a chance she knows something crucial. Blake continued, explaining the delicate situation. Initially, they might have dismissed the security company as irrelevant, but we must remember all personnel involved with the 4th disaster are covertly linked to this company, allowing us to operate under its guise. To the outside world, Ariana is just the boss of a security firm, unaware of the other employees working in the shadows. This, unfortunately, puts her at risk. "Why not deliver the message yourself?" Old Lep inquired, puzzled. Blake sighed, a hint of sadness in his tone. "She was overjoyed today, more than I've seen in a long time. I didn't want to dampen her spirits with such grim news." "Understood. I'll wait for the right moment," Old Lep agreed, sensing the weight of the situation. "But why support her decision to run a security company, knowing the risks?" Old Lep couldn't help but ask. Blake smiled, a mix of admiration and respect in his eyes. "Ariana is far from naive. Her seemingly fragile demeanor is misleading. She's lived through much, learning from both her experiences and my time-traveling insights. Considering her age and wisdom, to underestimate her would be a grave mistake. She's built the world's most formidable intelligence network, a feat not achieved by someone lacking in strength or cunning. Ariana is a formidable witch, on par with Dumbledore himself. My only concern is the possibility of an unforeseen attack. Much like the curse that afflicted Dumbledore, the item I've given her is a precaution for emergencies. In any direct confrontation, I pity her adversaries." Meanwhile, outside Gringotts in Diagon Alley, a scene unfolded that captured the attention of onlookers. Lance's convoy, which had departed with over 20 carriages, returned with but a single battered carriage. Its arrival, marked by the door falling off its hinges, suggested a harrowing ordeal. Lance stumbled out, a picture of disarray, only to be assisted by the master of Gringotts and several goblins. This unexpected turn of events left the Aurors, including Tonks, bewildered. "Has the conflict been resolved already?" she wondered aloud, her confusion mirrored by those around her. The rapid and dramatic return of Lance, coupled with the visible damage to the carriage, hinted at a fierce encounter, the details of which remained a mystery to the onlookers. Upon receiving further orders from the Ministry of Magic, the situation seemed dire. The fairy's fate was uncertain, and from the looks of it, victory was far from grasp. "Delix, are you going to ask?" Tonks inquired, her voice tinged with concern. "Yeah," Delis replied, his tone flat as he hastened his steps back towards Gringotts. Understanding the goblin's predicament was a task assigned to him by Moody. Earlier, he had learned from the goblins at Gringotts that Lance had led a team to pursue the robbers. However, now, only one goblin had returned, seemingly having barely escaped with his life. This development necessitated further investigation. Upon his return, Delis relayed the grim news, leaving the Aurors in a state of shock. The thought that out of hundreds of well-armed goblins, only one managed to escape in just over an hour was staggering. The goblins, despite being fully equipped, were formidable opponents, yet their defeat hinted at the robbers' terrifying strength. Tonks broke the ensuing silence with a speculative question. "You guys said, if the goblins can't defeat the robbers, will the higher-ups let us help too?" Her question underscored the gravity of the situation. The enemy was formidable enough to decimate hundreds of goblins, raising doubts about their own survival should they intervene. Meanwhile, at Gringotts, the atmosphere was somber. The goblins had believed their preparations and the might of their warriors would be sufficient to reclaim the stolen gold and resolve the crisis. Yet, they were overwhelmed by a group of monsters and a fire dragon, the latter being a creature they had once nurtured themselves. Lance, attempting to drown his fear in alcohol, was left to ponder their next move. After sending the goblins away to deliberate alone, he revealed a hidden dark mirror behind a bookshelf. With a drop of blood, he activated the mirror, only to report their failure to a figure known as President Locke. Locke's disbelief quickly turned to anger, but before Lance could explain further, dark tentacles emerged from the mirror, ending his life in a horrifying manner. That evening, the Ministry of Magic's representatives managed to communicate with the goblins, only to receive the shocking news of the massacre. The Daily Prophet was quick to headline the tragedy, reporting the death of hundreds of goblin warriors and the mysterious poisoning of the sole survivor who turned into a mummy within his office, as if drained of all vitality. The news spread panic across the wizarding world. Faced with the goblins' plea for assistance, Minister of Magic Fudge hesitated to dispatch Aurors, opting instead for a symbolic gesture that did little to address the looming threat. In the wake of the goblin stronghold being compromised, a wave of resignations swept through the ranks of the Aurors and strike teams. These individuals, unafraid of dark wizards due to their predictable nature, found themselves daunted by an adversary that even managed to infiltrate a goblin jail undetected. The prospect of facing such an enigmatic foe, coupled with the inherent distrust between human wizards and goblins, led many to reconsider their positions. No one was eager to lay down their life, especially not for the sake of goblins. In response to this crisis, Minister Fudge, in a bid to stem the tide of resignations, discreetly communicated through Scrimgeour that he had no intention of risking Auror lives for the goblins. This move was crucial, as Aurors represented not only Fudge's primary force, but also his most valuable asset. The potential public relations disaster that would follow significant Auror casualties was a risk Fudge was unwilling to take. Consequently, this strategy effectively quelled the wave of resignations. Fudge further mollified the situation by returning all submitted resignation letters, inadvertently boosting his standing among the Aurors. With Lance's death leaving the goblins leaderless and Fudge's decisive handling of the situation, no one dared approach the mysterious stronghold. The goblins, left with no other option, could only wait in silence for the return of their bank president to restore order. Meanwhile, the wizarding world experienced an odd tranquility, in stark contrast to the burgeoning success of Grindelwald's welfare institution. This organization, aimed at aiding marginalized groups within the magical community, rapidly enhanced Grindelwald's reputation. In an astonishing turn of events, the former Dark Lord's image was rehabilitated to the extent that he was nominated for the prestigious First-Class Order of Merlin. This nomination was partly attributed to Blake, whose advice was instrumental in the institution's founding, thereby significantly boosting his own fame. Blake's contributions, including his development of the Dragonpox potion formula, made him a strong candidate for receiving the Order of Merlin for a second time. Amidst these external developments, Hogwarts maintained its usual serenity. Blake was enjoying a peaceful evening until Cassandra delivered surprising news. She revealed her and Hermione's decision to skip a grade, having completed their fourth-year courses ahead of schedule. They were now seeking Professor McGonagall's approval to take the fifth-year early assessment, potentially allowing them to sit for the OWLs within the year. Blake, taken aback by this revelation, expressed his frustration at being kept in the dark, to which Cassandra explained their difficulty in finding an opportune moment to inform him due to his frequent absences. Cassandra's frustration was palpable as she spoke. "So, you've decided to skip a grade? Well, staying in the 3rd grade won't teach us anything new. Why waste our time?" She replied with a matter-of-fact tone. Blake slumped down, visibly upset. "Hey, isn't this what you wanted? To see us excel and move ahead? Why the long face now?" Cassandra inquired. "It's because, if you're in 5th grade, you won't be in the same classes as me," Blake said, his voice tinged with sadness. "Oh, please, stop playing the martyr. The only person you've consistently had classes with was Hermione. And me? You only shared a class with me during our first-year flying lessons, right?" Cassandra retorted, her irritation growing. "So, I won't have classes with Hermione either? That's even more depressing," Blake lamented. Cassandra, now furious, pushed Blake away, exclaiming, "Jerk! Go chase after your Hermione!" Yet, Blake returned, wrapping his arms around Cassandra's waist with a grin that betrayed no hint of his earlier sadness. "I've decided to skip a grade too," he declared. "Just to be in the same class as Hermione?" Cassandra asked, her displeasure evident. No, it's because I don't want to be calling you senior," Blake replied before dashing off towards Dumbledore's office, bypassing Professor McGonagall. After all, Dumbledore was his father and could provide a shortcut. Upon seeing Dumbledore, Blake didn't waste a moment. "Professor, I want to take the advanced placement exam and jump to the 5th grade too." Dumbledore, caught off guard, set aside the chocolate frog he was holding. "You shouldn't take the grade-skipping exam," he advised. "Why not?" Blake was taken aback. "You should take the graduation exam and finish school early," Dumbledore suggested. "What? Why would I want to graduate early? I haven't had my fill of Hogwarts yet," Blake protested, confusion and a hint of disappointment in his voice. Dumbledore smiled, a twinkle in his eye. "It's getting late. After all, you're someone who already has his own chocolate frog card." This conversation revealed not just the playful banter and deep connections between the characters, but also hinted at Blake's exceptional status, one that even Dumbledore, with his fondness for cryptic guidance, acknowledges. Chapter 478, Grindelwald's Proposal. "Chocolate frog cards have me on them?" Blake was astonished. "Indeed, take a look," Dumbledore said, handing over a card with a warm smile. "Your card is quite a rarity. I had to open many packs before finding yours." Blake grimaced as he accepted the card. "My cheeks hurt from all the chocolate frogs I've eaten." The portrait on the card winked back at him with a mischievous smile, reminiscent of Gilderoy Lockhart. "Whoever illustrated this really made it. Striking." Dumbledore reclaimed the card, chuckling. "I think it's splendid. The portrait captures a handsome likeness, reminiscent of my younger days." Blake couldn't resist teasing. "Professor, have you been leading up to this compliment all along?" Dumbledore laughed off the jest. "Well, on a more serious note, what are your thoughts on graduating early?" Blake's head shook vehemently. "I don't want to graduate early. I'm not ready to leave Hogwarts behind, nor am I eager to start working. I'd rather cherish my time here, even if it's challenging." "Are you certain?" "Returning to Hogwarts might not offer you any new knowledge at this point," Dumbledore said, his tone turning serious. "Several professors have expressed concerns about having someone as knowledgeable as you attending their classes. They feel it might be a waste of your time." Dumbledore explained that not only the Hogwarts faculty, but also members of the wizarding community had suggested early graduation for Blake. Given his achievements, including receiving the Order of Merlin, first class, while still in his 3rd year, continuing as a student seemed unnecessary. Blake was disheartened. "Have I lost my place as a favored student?" "You've demonstrated exceptional strength and are already being recognized with prestigious awards," Dumbledore reassured him. "Staying at Hogwarts might not be the best path for someone of your caliber. We all believe you're destined for greater things, and remaining here might limit your potential." Blake fell silent, understanding Dumbledore's logic. "I've been concerned about your future, especially with your time-traveling abilities, which is why I hesitated to bring this up," Dumbledore continued. "But seeing as you've come to discuss advancing your studies, it seemed the right moment to address your graduation." Blake sighed. "Leaving Hogwarts will be hard. It's been a sanctuary for me, second only to the Marian orphanage." I know, Blake. I've considered your feelings deeply, Dumbledore said gently. I didn't want your talents to force you out of Hogwarts prematurely, so I've thought of a solution. Or rather, it was Grindelwald's idea. Blake perked up. What kind of solution? Do you remember Grindelwald's offer for you to teach at Nurmengard? Dumbledore asked with a knowing smile. How did you know about that? Blake was taken aback. Dumbledore's smile widened. Grindelwald has shared more with me than just that, Blake. But let's focus on this proposal for now. It might just be the opportunity you need to bridge your time at Hogwarts with your future endeavors. Blake maintained a nonchalant expression as he glanced at the letters from Grindelwald, now crumpled into balls that could fill 2 large sacks. He asked hesitantly, The method you mentioned, does it involve me staying at Hogwarts to become a professor? Yes, Blake. Once you graduate early, I plan to offer you a position to stay on as a professor, Dumbledore replied with a smile. This way, you can continue to be part of Hogwarts. Plus, you'll have the opportunity to spend more time with your friends. How does that sound? Blake hesitated. Well, consider this. As a professor, you'll have your own office and bedroom. This means you can conduct experiments or any private matters without having to seek other places, right? Dumbledore added, seeing Blake's interest piqued. Blake was indeed tempted by the idea. Currently, he relied on the Room of Requirement for privacy, but that made him inaccessible to others unless they used a Feeny, X, or a house elf to reach him. Having his own office would solve this issue, yet he still harbored reservations. Professor, aren't all the teaching positions at Hogwarts already filled? If I were to be hired, wouldn't that displace another professor? I wouldn't want to take someone's job, unless it's Snape's, Blake said with a mischievous grin. Ah, sneeze! Snape, far away in the underground classroom, sneezed suddenly, ruining his potion. Unbeknownst to him, his position was being coveted by Blake. Dumbledore chuckled, shaking his head. You certainly have the skills to teach potions, but Severus has been performing well. I can't dismiss him without cause. Blake touched his chin, musing, It's easy. I'll find a way to make him leave. Dumbledore laughed, slightly admonishing. Why must you always think of ways to trouble Severus? I was only joking, Professor. I wouldn't want to spend all day in the underground classroom, Blake replied with a smile. But seriously, what do you have in mind? I know you wouldn't want to displace any of the current professors. You're exceptionally talented in all subjects, making you qualified to teach almost anything. However, as you've noted, we don't need to replace any current professors, Dumbledore said, his eyes twinkling. So, I've decided to adopt a rather unorthodox approach. Much like our old friend Grindelwald, I plan to petition the Magical Education Department to introduce a new subject, alchemy. Blake looked at Dumbledore, surprised by his cunning and audacity. Professor, if Grindelwald hears about this, he'll be furious. That's a risk I'm willing to take. After all, you won't be going to Nurmengard. It's better we utilize his method here at Hogwarts, Dumbledore said with a chuckle, clearly enjoying the prospect of outmaneuvering Grindelwald. Blake was taken aback by Dumbledore's boldness. What do you think of this plan? Dumbledore asked, rubbing his hands together. We hadn't offered alchemy before, due to the high costs associated with mastering it, which many students' families couldn't afford. However, I've seen your work in alchemy. You've revolutionized the field by simplifying processes and reducing the need for expensive materials. Nico mentioned in his letter that you've made alchemy accessible to everyone. I see no reason to pass up such an opportunity, Dumbledore continued. Blake, if you're willing, I'm ready to proceed immediately. Blake considered Dumbledore's proposal. The idea of making alchemy accessible and teaching it at Hogwarts was appealing. It was an opportunity to make a significant impact, not just within the castle walls, but in the wider wizarding world. Under the gentle gaze of Dumbledore, Blake felt a sudden weight in his heart. Though he often dreamed of a simple life as a fisherman, his burgeoning abilities made such a carefree existence nearly impossible. Forces beyond his control seemed to push him towards a destiny filled with responsibility. Whether it was mastering alchemy to craft aids for his friends or concocting new potion formulas to assist those in need, Blake found himself far from the idyllic life of leisure he envisioned. Despite his daily musings about leading a carefree life, he was, in reality, caught in a relentless whirlwind of activity. Okay, perhaps becoming a professor isn't such a bad idea after all, Blake conceded, scratching his head in resignation. Tom aspired to be a professor but never achieved it. Dumbledore responded with a smile. Tom couldn't become a professor. As you rightly pointed out to Severus, a person lacking in moral character has no place teaching others. And you, Blake, certainly don't fall into that category. After a significant event at the welfare institution, Blake's moral integrity was beyond question. Feeling somewhat embarrassed by Dumbledore's praise, Blake replied, "Professor, you're making me blush. I'm not sure if I'm up to the task." Dumbledore reassured him warmly. "You are more than capable, my boy. I'm certain that parents would be overjoyed to know you'll be teaching their children. Never underestimate the impact you have on the wizarding world, Blake." A bit shyly, Blake inquired, "So, when can I take the exams to graduate early?" Dumbledore revealed with a smile, "Actually, the Ministry of Magic's Education Department has been in touch with me for quite some time about this. They, like many others, are eager for you to graduate early. Therefore, all your assessments have been waived. As long as you're willing, you can graduate immediately. Considering your achievements, including 3 first-class Order of Merlin medals, it's absurd to think you'd need to take exams to graduate. The Education Department wisely decided to exempt you from the assessment process." Blake was momentarily speechless, reflecting on his tumultuous time at Hogwarts and how eagerly the world seemed to want him to move on. Upon leaving Dumbledore's office, Blake was still processing the surreal nature of the conversation. He was greeted by Cassandra and Hermione, who were eagerly awaiting news. "Hey, how did it go? Are you going to be a senior, or will you join us in the 5th grade?" Cassandra asked with a bright smile. Hermione added, "Professor Dumbledore had no reason to deny your application, Worley, just like Professor McGonagall had no reason to deny our early assessments." Blake, scratching his face awkwardly, admitted, "It seems I've disappointed you both. I won't be advancing to the 5th grade with you." "How is that possible?" Hermione asked, puzzled. Cassandra, puffing out her chest with a hint of pride, teased, "Ha! That means you'll have to call me senior sister from now on. So why don't you start by addressing me respectfully?" Blake sighed, "I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. I won't be able to assist you seniors." "Why?" Cassandra asked, stunned. "Dumbledore didn't dismiss me. Instead, he suggested I graduate early and then invited me to stay on as a professor." "Ah?" Cassandra and Hermione were both taken aback by the revelation. "So, you'll soon be calling me professor," Blake said with a hint of amusement. "Cassandra, why don't you practice by calling me Professor Green a couple of times?" Cassandra, however, was too shocked to engage in Blake's teasing. "Merlin, the world has gone mad, a 13-year-old professor?" Hermione, quickly regaining her composure, shot Cassandra a glance, signaling her to accept the extraordinary turn of events. Filled with disdain, he remarked, "Truly, there's no need for such commotion. A 13-year-old professor? How does that even begin to compare to a 13-year-old who has been awarded the Order of Merlin, first class?" Cassandra was taken aback. Indeed, this individual had already surpassed the achievement of becoming a professor at such a young age with far more significant accomplishments. Meanwhile, in Nurmengard, Grindelwald was in a fury, having already hurled several cups in his anger. "That old fool! Despicable! How utterly shameless!" he bellowed. "To think he plagiarized my methods, and then he had the audacity to write to me, flaunting it. Does he take pleasure in killing, in destroying his own soul?" He continued to rant. "What nonsense! Blake won't stay in Nurmengard, so he might as well remain at Hogwarts and teach. Absolute rubbish, that old fool!" In a moment of frustration, he exclaimed, "Ah, who crafted this cup? Why won't it shatter?" A feeble voice responded, "Boss, that's a golden cup made by goblins." "Ha! Curse those goblins!" Grindelwald roared in anger, his voice echoing through the halls. The goblins, caught off guard by his outburst, could only exchange bewildered glances, wondering what had provoked such a reaction from the infamous wizard. Chapter 479. Blake's New Office. "Congratulations, Blake. You're nearing graduation," Professor McGonagall said with a smile as Blake entered her office. "Albus has informed me of your desire to remain at Hogwarts as a professor. Honestly, it's quite surprising. yet it somehow makes perfect sense. Blake offered a helpless smile in response. I'm not sure what to say, Professor. He had come to Professor McGonagall's office after Dumbledore had, once again, delegated the responsibility of arranging Blake's future at Hogwarts to her. Don't worry, Blake. I have every confidence in your abilities, she reassured him before getting down to business. Do you plan to graduate this summer, or would you prefer to graduate immediately? Blake scratched his head, puzzled. What's the difference? Professor McGonagall explained. There's a slight difference. Due to the introduction of a new alchemy class, we've decided to make it an elective course available only to third-year students and above. Since this year's students have already selected their electives, the course won't officially start until next year. After a moment of thought, Blake decided, I'll graduate during the summer vacation, after this school year. With the ability to use the dimensional door to leave Hogwarts and travel anywhere at any time, there's no need for me to leave now. Professor McGonagall nodded, unsurprised by his decision. In that case, the school has decided to prepare an office for you in advance. Since attending classes is no longer beneficial for you, you can use this office for your own research in the coming months. She added, I'll also speak to Mrs. Pintz to ensure you have access to the restricted section of the library at any time. Blake was thrilled. That's really great. The room of requirement is useful, but having my own office at Hogwarts is something else entirely. Professor McGonagall smiled slightly. As long as you're happy. Blake then hesitantly asked, Professor, should I still attend classes? Professor McGonagall quickly responded, It might be best if you didn't. It's not that you're unwelcome, but your understanding and mastery of the subjects surpass even ours. It can be quite intimidating for us as teachers. She continued, Teaching you makes me fear making a mistake, despite my decades of experience in transfiguration. Your presence in class puts a significant amount of pressure on all of us, and frankly, many professors find it daunting. Blake smiled sheepishly at her explanation. Okay, then I won't attend classes anymore. With his friends Cassandra and Hermione having advanced a grade, Blake found himself without the same academic commitments, allowing him to focus on his new role and the opportunities it presented. Attending classes together, Hannah often teased her, while the rest of the girls were not very familiar to her. Thus, it seemed inconsequential whether she attended classes or not. Professor McGonagall breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing Blake's promise to forego future classes. Hogwarts, founded thousands of years ago, had never before had a student whom the professors advised to skip classes and pursue their interests instead. That student was Blake. All right, I'll show you to the office we've arranged for you, Professor McGonagall said, standing up and leading the way out of the room. Blake quickly followed her. By the way, have you mentioned your early graduation and professorship to anyone else? She inquired. I've told Cassandra and Hermione, Blake replied. In that case, let's keep this matter between us for now, Professor McGonagall suggested. Prematurely assigning you an office might not reflect well on the school. However, I will inform the public that this space is a laboratory for you to avoid any need for secrecy. She whispered this to Blake as they walked down the corridor, passing students who quieted down at the sight of Professor McGonagall, but soon turned their attention to Blake, whose mysterious aura was amplified by his unpredictable presence and the professor's indifference towards his class attendance. Ignoring the whispers, Professor McGonagall led Blake out of the teaching building and towards a tower near the greenhouse. I know you have a fondness for animals and plants, and you appreciate purity, she said. This tower used to house the divination classroom, but since Professor Trelawney relocated it to her top-floor office, it has been vacant. They ascended the tower, finding the first to third floors comprised of empty rooms, unremarkable and devoid of interest. The fourth floor revealed a large, circular classroom in a state of disrepair, with rotting furniture, peeling walls, and an abundance of dust and cobwebs. Apologies, I've been rather busy lately and haven't had the chance to organize a cleanup, Professor McGonagall admitted with a hint of embarrassment. Oh, it's no trouble at all, Professor. I can take care of it. Blake offered promptly, unwilling to impose further on Professor McGonagall's generosity. Are you certain you want to handle the cleanup yourself? She asked. Yes, since it will be my classroom, I'd prefer to clean it myself, Blake insisted. Very well, I'll leave it in your hands. And remember, if you need assistance, don't hesitate to ask, Professor McGonagall said as they continued to the 5th floor. The office on the 5th floor was a stark contrast to the classroom below, having been meticulously cleaned and furnished with new desks and chairs. The spacious, well-lit round office bore a resemblance to Dumbledore's, with its tower structure. Blake was pleasantly surprised to discover the office also featured a duplex layout, with a ladder leading to an attic converted into a bedroom, slightly smaller than the office, but equally well appointed. Blake only needed to bring his bags and check in. How are you finding the office? Professor McGonagall inquired, her tone warm and inviting. I'm very satisfied. Thank you, Professor McGonagall, Blake responded with a bright smile. Professor McGonagall returned the smile. As long as you're satisfied, you can move in any time now. Thank you, I'll do that. But first, I plan to return to the dormitory to inform my friends. Don't worry, I'm aware of what should and shouldn't be shared, Blake assured her. Of course, it wouldn't do to suddenly disappear from the dormitory without a word, Professor McGonagall remarked, her smile turning into a playful grin. Though, I've heard you haven't spent much time there over the past few days? Blake's cheeks flushed with embarrassment as he hastily explained. Ahem, I've just developed a habit of delving into my studies at night. My mind seems more active then. Professor McGonagall chose not to probe further. After a few more instructions, she left Blake to his work. Once alone, Blake surveyed his new office with eager anticipation. Rubbing his hands together, he declared, Okay, it's time to make this place my own. He retrieved a suitcase from his robe, which he had enchanted to float beside him. Opening it, he snapped his fingers, and a myriad of items began to emerge. Books, cups, kettles, coffee beans, candies, and various other objects floated in the air, orbiting the room like a miniature galaxy. With another snap of his fingers, the items began to find their places. Books neatly lined the shelves, cups and kettles settled on the coffee table, and clothes and towels soared up to the attic, arranging themselves in the wardrobe and bathroom. As Blake left the office, the room continued to organize itself, transforming into a space that truly felt like his own. Meanwhile, at Gringotts, a scene of great importance unfolded. A luxurious carriage, drawn by majestic creatures, descended from the sky. The goblins of Gringotts, upon noticing the arrival, rushed out to greet the carriage with the utmost respect. The door opened automatically, and a tall goblin, in a simple yet elegant red robe, stepped out. Despite his humble attire, the reverence he commanded was unmistakable. This spectacle caught the attention of many in Diagon Alley, including members of the Wiccan Party and numerous reporters, all of whom were promptly denied entry to Gringotts. Back in his office, Locke, the president of Gringotts, was briefed on the situation. Without concern, he assured his staff that he would handle the matter and instructed them to resume their duties. He also ordered the recall of all wizard employees from their holiday, addressing the goblins' hesitance and reminding them of the complex relationship between wizards and goblins. He emphasized the importance of not underestimating wizards, drawing a parallel to the tragic history of house elves to underscore his point. Locke's final directive was to expedite the repair of Gringotts' underground vaults to ensure the bank's swift return to normal operations, highlighting the urgency of maintaining stability and trust in their services. With urgency in his voice, Locke addressed the gathering of goblins. No sooner had he finished speaking than a buzz of conversation erupted among them. President Locke, our treasury has suffered significant losses, one of the goblins began, only to be interrupted by Locke's dismissive gesture. When we were bested by those thieves, doubts about our capability to safeguard the vaults were already circulating. Concealing the truth now serves no purpose, Locke stated firmly. He explained how the thieves, with alarming ease, overpowered the well-armed goblin guards. Even Fudge, paralyzed by fear, hesitated to dispatch Aurors for assistance, leading to some Aurors resigning in fear. Given these circumstances, it's hardly surprising that the robbers managed to plunder numerous vaults within Gringotts, Locke added. He continued, Many have already received compensation from Grindelwald, and for the moment, pose no threat to us. However, the real concern lies with the pure-blood families. Their vaults contained more than just gold galleons. Locke paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in before adding, "Fortunately, many of the large vault owners are currently languishing in Azkaban." This revelation prompted a shared look of understanding among the goblins. "Then the gold we've lost," one goblin ventured, seeking reassurance. "I'll find a way to recover the gold. That's not your concern." Locke assured them, "Our immediate priority is to compensate those affected by the breach. Our situation has changed. We can no longer afford to be preoccupied with financial losses, not when our vulnerabilities have been laid bare." Locke's tone shifted as he outlined the next steps. "First, we'll settle our debts with Grindelwald's welfare institution. After that, I'll personally address the grievances of the pure-blood families." He then considered the practicalities of replenishing the vaults. "If we find the vaults running low on gold galleons, we'll transfer funds from other Gringotts branches. However, we must bolster our security this time around." Locke's gaze sharpened with determination. "I've heard rumors about Dumbledore's sister founding a highly reputable security firm. Perhaps it's time we sought their expertise." Chapter 480. Blake, can't learn anything new. Why don't I teach you directly? The goblins actually want to hire Ariana's security company. Blake mused, a smile playing on his lips as he tucked the letter away. This is interesting. Goblins are known for their exclusivity, their interactions with wizards primarily shaped by historical conflicts. The Goblin rebellions, etched in the annals of magical history, highlighted the deep-seated mistrust between the two races. Furthermore, the goblins had long blamed the wizarding community for the thefts at Gringotts, their most sacred institution. Given this backdrop, it seemed inconceivable for goblins to place their trust in wizards again. Yet, in a surprising turn of events, not only had they reinstated all wizard employees at Gringotts, but they were now inviting wizards to partake in the critical task of gold transportation. This unprecedented move suggested a significant shift in goblin attitudes, hinting at a deeper motive behind their actions. More puzzling was their decision to bypass the government's Aurors led by Fudge in favor of a private security firm. Given Fudge's reluctance to confront notorious criminals, it was unlikely he would decline a lucrative escort mission. The goblins' true intent was clear. They were specifically seeking Ariana's expertise. However, Blake harbored no concerns. As he had assured Old Lep, Ariana was not only a wizard of Dumbledore's caliber, but also possessed a powerful ring from her future self. With Blake's contingency plans in place, Ariana's safety was the least of his worries. Shifting his focus, Blake began to arrange his new bedroom. He placed a suitcase on the table and methodically unpacked its contents. Ariana's security company, aptly named Dumbledore Security, had quickly gained a reputation for reliability, perhaps buoyed by the Dumbledore legacy. Despite its initial facade, the company was thriving. Dumbledore Security operated from a unique headquarters situated at the base of the fourth natural disaster. This strategic location underscored the company's true nature. All its field agents were members of the fourth natural disaster. Ariana had established a nominal office in Diagon Alley for administrative purposes, ensuring that all missions were conducted under strict anonymity to maintain the organization's mystique. At that moment, Ariana, disguised with an aged appearance, bid farewell to two goblin clients. Once they were out of sight, she retreated to her office and shed her disguise, revealing her youthful visage, a secret kept from all but her closest allies and family. This precaution was necessary to avert any undue attention or speculation about her seemingly ageless appearance, which could attract those with nefarious intentions. Ariana studied the route map provided by the goblins, drafting a letter to the fourth natural disaster base to outline the new mission. Despite her reservations, she recognized the necessity of accepting the goblins' request. This mission was not only a test of their capabilities, but also an opportunity to delve deeper into the chaos that lay ahead. She was acutely aware that the goblins' overtures were not without ulterior motives. The journey promised to be fraught with danger, possibly involving staged thefts designed to entrap her. Yet, Ariana was undeterred, prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead with the support of her allies and the strategic acumen that had become her hallmark. Ariana, feeling the weight of her situation, quickly penned a letter and dispatched it through a vanishing cabinet on her desk. Moments later, she reopened the cabinet, now empty, and a confident smile graced her features. If they aim to use me as bait for the fourth natural disaster, they won't dare send goblins. But then, where would they find enough powerful wizards? It's quite the puzzle, she mused aloud. Suddenly, she expanded her protective measures. Field! Expand! With a buzz, a light blue shield swiftly enveloped the room, providing a temporary haven from Hogwarts pervasive magic, allowing Muggle devices to function. Blake, surrounded by the stable glow of the protective shields, couldn't contain his excitement as he powered on his camera. The device whirred to life, and he laughed, thrilled by the success. Finally, a way to enjoy some Muggle conveniences without interference from Hogwarts magic. His triumph was short-lived, however, as a sharp noise from an alchemical device on his table disrupted the shield, plunging the room back under Hogwarts's magical influence. The camera shut off, and Blake, taken aback, inspected the device, now emitting a burnt odor. It seems I've still much to learn about balancing these energies, he sighed, setting aside his plans for a home theater. Blake had envisioned transforming his bedroom into a personal cinema, a respite from the monotony of wizarding life. The wizarding world, with its limited recreational activities like Quidditch and wizard chess, paled in comparison to the entertainment options available in the Muggle world. The thought of lounging with a movie, enjoying the company of friends, and the simple pleasure of Muggle technology excited him. But first, I must master this device, he thought, returning to his work. A knock interrupted his musings. Utilizing a magical version of a peephole, a mirror, Blake glimpsed Cassandra and Hermione peering curiously outside his office. Noticing no sign of other friends or Professor Flitwick, who often sought him out for discussions on charms, he gestured magically, and the door below swung open. "Come in, and please close the door behind you," he called out, welcoming his visitors into his world of magical and Muggle innovation. Cassandra felt a wave of relief wash over her as she opened the door and stepped inside. The office was empty, prompting her to call out, "Blake, where are you?" Descending from the attic, Blake replied, "I was just up there, decorating my bedroom." Cassandra, slightly puzzled, mentioned, "I thought I had knocked on the wrong door because there was a sign indicating it was a research laboratory." Blake chuckled. "Ah, that was Professor McGonagall's idea. It was technically against the rules to assign me an office so early, so we had to disguise it as a research laboratory assigned to me." As he spoke, Blake fetched a large bottle and 2 cups, pouring drinks for both of them. "So, what brings 2 students to visit this professor? Is there something you're struggling to understand?" Blake teased. Cassandra laughed. "Professor, have you forgotten that it was you who invited us here?" "Just kidding, Cassandra. Please, take a seat. I indeed have something important to discuss with you both." Blake gestured towards the armchairs, inviting Cassandra and Hermione to sit. "What's the matter?" Hermione inquired, curiosity piqued. Blake began, "You've both been progressing remarkably fast in your studies, haven't you?" The girls nodded in agreement, attributing their rapid learning to the aid of the Soul Lantern and the Moonflower. "In essence, you're quickly outpacing the 5th grade curriculum," Blake observed. Hermione, reflecting on their progress, shared, "Looking back, it feels almost surreal." Cassandra, growing impatient with the preamble, pressed, "Let's cut to the chase. What do you need from us?" She had a hunch about Blake's intentions, given her familiarity with him. "I'm not asking for anything per se. I'm merely pointing out that soon you'll find the standard classes less beneficial as your self-study pace surpasses the professor's lectures," Blake explained, his message clear. Cassandra, understanding his implication, asked skeptically, "So, you're suggesting we learn exclusively from you? Are you up to something?" "I assure you, Cassandra, I'm entirely serious," Blake responded, his tone reflecting genuine consideration. He believed that guiding Hermione and Cassandra, given their accelerated learning through the Goldfinger, was the logical next step. "And what exactly do you propose?" Hermione inquired, intrigued. Blake shared his vision. "Given your current level of knowledge, passing the OWLs should pose no challenge. Instead of following the standard curriculum, I suggest we adopt a more tailored approach to your education. Cassandra and Hermione exchanged glances, both recognizing the merit in Blake's proposal. Their advancement to the 5th grade had rendered most classes redundant, as they already possessed the covered knowledge. Moreover, this arrangement would allow us to see each other daily, Blake added, a hint of longing in his voice. Both girls blushed, then playfully scolded, "Get out!" Cassandra teased, "You've been away for days. Didn't you miss us then?" Blake, feigning sorrow, replied, "Of course, I missed you, but knowing I'd see you upon my return made it bearable. Now, without this plan, our paths might seldom cross." Moved by his words, Cassandra softened. All right, but how will you convince Professor McGonagall?" Blake smiled confidently. "I believe your enthusiasm for learning will make a compelling case." Answering questions during class, right? Hermione and Cassandra nodded in agreement. It was a well-established tradition for them to actively participate in class discussions. Blake continued, "So the professors are already familiar with your current academic level, correct?" The two nodded again in confirmation. "All right, then you should both go to Professor McGonagall together and explain that you're no longer gaining new knowledge from our current curriculum. Given your exceptional performance in class and your history of advancing grades, Professor McGonagall will undoubtedly take your concerns seriously. After that, she'll have a few options. She might allow you to skip grades again, or she could suggest alternative ways for you to continue your education. It's clear that staying in your current situation is a waste of your time. Consider this. Each professor is responsible for students across multiple grades. They're incredibly busy. How could they possibly spare the time for individualized attention?" "But," Blake interrupted with a reassuring gesture, placing a hand on his chest. "I have plenty of time. My skills are more than adequate, and we have a great relationship. If she doesn't make arrangements for you to join me, where else would I want you to be?" Cassandra nodded, her decision made. "Okay, I'm going to see Professor McGonagall now. Granger, are you coming?" "Of course, I'm going. Don't misunderstand. I don't want to fall behind in my studies," Hermione said, her voice tinged with determination. Cassandra, with a hint of pride, took Blake's arm and teased, "You should be more straightforward, Granger. Otherwise—" Hermione glared at Cassandra, frustration evident in her expression. Was that really necessary? She thought, her patience wearing thin. Chapter 481, Ghost on the Sea. Beneath the shadow of an ancient statue on the bustling streets of France, Ariana Dumbledore stood, her gaze intently fixed on the statue's base. She glanced around, ensuring no prying eyes were upon her. Confident of her solitude, she stepped forward, her form seamlessly merging with the statue's base as if she were a ghost, her presence momentarily blurred before the scenery transformed entirely. Gone were the mundane streets of the Muggle world, replaced by the vibrant and bustling Wizarding Street that rivaled the famed Diagon Alley in its liveliness. Ariana navigated through the crowd, her destination clear, Gringotts, the Wizarding Bank in France. As she made her way, cloaked figures emerged from the throngs, trailing her in silence. By the time she reached the bank's grand entrance, a contingent of over 50 had amassed behind her, a sight that made the other wizards on the street instinctively step back, wary of the gathering's intentions. Memories of the infamous Gringotts heist in the UK lingered in their minds, sparking fear of a similar event unfolding. However, Ariana was no thief. Her purpose was far from malevolent. She was there to assist in the secure transport of gold for the goblins. Discarding her cloak, she looked up at the French Gringotts, its facade bearing the same intricate craftsmanship as its British counterpart, designed to exude an air of kindness despite the goblins' reputation for anything but. The goblins, noticing the unusual assembly at their doorstep, sent a guard to investigate. After a brief exchange with Ariana, the guard hurried back inside, and soon 2 more goblins emerged to greet her. "Welcome, Mrs. Dumbledore. We did not expect you so early," one of them said, a smile playing on his lips. Ariana responded with a polite nod, her mind racing to place these goblins among those she had previously dealt with in Diagon Alley, though their faces eluded her recognition. Another goblin, introducing himself as Egg, the manager of the French Gringotts, approached with a discernible air of arrogance. His gaze swept over the wizards behind Ariana, his demeanor clearly skeptical of their presence. "This is Egg. Please, pay no mind to his manner. It's just how he is," the first goblin explained, attempting to smooth over the tension. "We are relying on your assistance today." Egg, however, was not easily placated. "I fail to understand this trust in human wizards. You've convinced the headquarters, but should anything go awry, the responsibility is yours alone," he stated, his tone laced with reluctance. Ariana sensed the underlying tension, realizing that perhaps only the British goblins and their higher-ups were privy to the details of this operation. Egg's skepticism was not unfounded. Goblins traditionally harbored little trust in wizards for such critical tasks. Seeking to ease his concerns, Ariana offered a reassuring smile. "I understand your caution, but rest assured, I have a plan to ensure the gold's safe passage to the UK. Egg's response was dismissive. "And what might that be?" Choosing to overlook his rudeness, Ariana continued, "You're surely aware of Blake, the youngest ever recipient of the Order of Merlin, First Class. His involvement is crucial to our plan." Egg, though visibly unimpressed, couldn't hide his recognition of the name. "I've heard of him, but what does Blake have to do with this?" Ariana's confidence did not waver. "Everything. His expertise and reputation are exactly what we need to guarantee the safety of this operation." Ariana had just finished explaining her plan to use a special alchemy tool for transporting gold galleons directly from France to the UK, a method she believed would eliminate all risks associated with the journey. She glanced at the two goblins in front of her, eager to see their reaction. The tool she mentioned was similar to the one used to exonerate Sirius Black, proving its effectiveness. However, the goblins' reactions were mixed. The unnamed goblin appeared visibly panicked, while Egg, the other goblin, frowned in skepticism. "How about it? If you're doubtful, you can test it yourself first," Ariana suggested, revealing a brand-new teleportation device from her pocket. She had the blueprint, thanks to Blake, allowing her to produce as many as needed. The panic on the unnamed goblin's face intensified at her offer. Edgar, however, remained unconvinced. "Human wizards, no matter what they say, I still can't trust you," he declared. "This alchemy device is too unpredictable. Who knows where the gold will end up when you transfer it?" The other goblin, seizing the moment, expressed regret with a forced smile. "Oh, Mrs. Dumbledore, we're bound by regulations that require us to escort the gold personally. So, as magical as your device may be, we cannot use it. We hope you understand." Ariana responded with a gentle smile. "Well, if those are the rules, we must abide by them. Besides, we're already receiving a generous reward for assisting with the transfer. It wouldn't feel right to press further." Relieved by Ariana's understanding, the goblins quickly moved to prepare for departure. Soon, 5 carriages, each pulled by thestrals, descended from the sky. A contingent of well-armed goblin guards, their gear noticeably superior to their British counterparts, emerged from Gringotts. It was clear they had learned from past mistakes. Several goblin guards then carried out boxes, likely enchanted with the undetectable extension charm to hold vast amounts of gold. Ariana, however, remained skeptical about the box's contents, considering the possibility of a trap. Once the boxes were loaded into the carriages, 2 goblin guards boarded each one. Edgar, however, pointedly mentioned that no carriage had been prepared for Ariana's group, assuming they had made their own arrangements. After his curt remark, he climbed into a carriage, leaving Ariana and her companions to fend for themselves. The other goblin, in a tone of false apology, said, "Oh, this guy is really serious. Don't worry, I'll arrange another carriage for your group." Ariana, unfazed, replied, "It's not necessary. We've prepared broomsticks. It's more convenient for us to fly alongside the convoy and provide protection." "Ah, you're more thoughtful than I expected," the goblin said, his flattery not masking his disdain. Despite his efforts to persuade Ariana to join them in a carriage, she knew better than to let her guard down, especially given her identity as Dumbledore's sister and the inherent risks involved. As the Thestrals pulled the carriages into the sky, Ariana and the members of the 4th Natural Disaster silently mounted their broomsticks, ready to escort the convoy. Their journey was about to begin, fraught with uncertainty, but guided by a clear mission to ensure the gold's safe passage. From their pockets, enhanced by the traceless stretching charm, they produced brooms and took off, circling the carriage in a high-speed, orderly manner. The sight was impressive, a testament to the reputation of Dumbledore security. The wizards' display of skill and coordination made it clear they were not to be trifled with. Inside the carriage, the goblin, surrounded by these formidable wizards, couldn't shake off a growing sense of unease. He feared he might be the first to confront any potential threat, given his position. Despite not knowing the true purpose of their journey, Edgar, the goblin, was filled with apprehension. His distrust for the wizards was deep-seated, and the fact that they were transporting a significant amount of gold with relatively few guards only added to his concern. He couldn't help but question the wisdom of his superior's decision to entrust their safety to human wizards with only a handful of goblin guards for such a critical mission. It seemed almost as if they were inviting trouble. Noticing the goblin's anxious demeanor, Ariana, with a reassuring smile, asked, "How do you find my team's performance?" Edgar, trying to mask his nervousness, quickly responded with a thumbs up. "Very impressive. They seem like seasoned warriors." "Then why the worried look?" Ariana inquired, her smile unwavering as she casually cleaned her wand with a handkerchief. Edgar sighed. "It's just that I've always been behind a desk. This is my first time on such an important mission. I guess I'm just a bit out of my element." Ariana chuckled softly. "Don't worry. As long as we're here, your gold is safe. Trust us." Edgar's gaze inadvertently drifted to the ring on Ariana's finger, noting the contrast between its elegance and her aged appearance. The journey continued without incident, the carriage enchanted to avoid detection by muggles until they reached the beach. The planned route required crossing the sea, a detail that seemed to unsettle the goblin further. Ariana, observing his reaction, smiled to herself. She anticipated that if they were to be ambushed, the sea would be the likely location. It was a strategic choice. Aerial combat imposed limitations on both parties, potentially neutralizing the wizards' advantage. However, Ariana wondered if their attackers had a strategy to overcome these limitations. As they sailed over the sea, a sudden chill enveloped Ariana, signaling their entry into a dense fog. Edgar, ever vigilant, immediately sensed the change and turned to Ariana with suspicion. "Is this your doing?" he demanded. Ariana remained calm. "Relax, Edgar. This isn't our doing." "How can I relax? I know you wizards are capable of anything." Ariana's patience wore thin. "Enough. When will you stop letting your prejudices cloud your judgment? The world knows we're on this mission. If anything happens to you, do you think we'd be spared? Why would we sabotage our own mission?" Edgar, still unconvinced, suggested, "Maybe you plan to steal the gold and remain anonymous." Ariana interrupted. "For such a small amount of gold? Do you really think I'd risk everything for that? If you can't see reason, then stay in your fear. But know this, we are here to protect you, and that's exactly what we'll do." The conversation was cut short as the carriage continued its journey through the fog, with Ariana and her team ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, their commitment to the mission unwavering. Ariana gazed out the window, her eyes narrowing as she observed the many figures materializing through the thick fog. Unlike anything she had seen before, these figures stood suspended in midair, devoid of any visible means of support, akin to specters haunting the gloomy skies. At that moment, the convoy ground to a halt, and a palpable tension filled the air as a confrontation loomed with the mysterious arrivals. Without a moment's hesitation, Ariana vanished from within the carriage, reappearing the next instant atop its roof. With a graceful stroke of her wand, she surveyed the enigmatic figures from afar, her demeanor calm yet commanding. It appears these individuals are far from ordinary. Prepare yourselves and assume battle positions," Ariana instructed, her voice resonating with authority. The members of the Fourth Disaster, ever loyal to Blake, quickly grouped around her, forming a protective circle. Despite the odd and intimidating appearance of their adversaries, their resolve remained unshaken. I'm here to assist as well," stammered the goblin, clambering onto the roof to stand beside Ariana. Her sudden disappearance had taken him by surprise, leaving him momentarily disoriented. Ariana spared him a brief glance before signaling to one of her subordinates. The man nodded in understanding and positioned himself atop the carriage, subtly ensuring the goblin was well guarded. This arrangement, while seemingly protective, left the goblin feeling uncomfortably constrained, his plans for a covert maneuver thwarted. "Ariana Dumbledore?" called out a voice from among the spectral figures. "Yes, that's me. And you are?" Ariana responded, stepping forward boldly. As she moved to the edge of the carriage roof, it seemed as though she would plummet to the ground below. However, at the last moment, a ripple coursed through the air beneath her feet, allowing her to stand suspended, mirroring her opponents. "Oh, a Dumbledore indeed," the voice remarked, a hint of surprise lacing its tone. Ariana smiled, her eyes twinkling with a mixture of amusement and challenge. "I presume you haven't blocked our path merely to exchange pleasantries?" "Indeed, we are here to rob," came the blunt admission. Chapter 482. The Monster in the Red Cloak. A Fierce Battle at Sea. "Oh, that's unfortunate. We happen to be protecting the gold. If you want to rob it, you'll have to get through us." Ariana's smile remained unchanged, yet a wand suddenly appeared in her hand. Simultaneously, the surrounding members of the fourth natural disaster also quietly revealed their wands. Despite the prohibition on leaking modified Muggle equipment, they were still equipped with numerous life-saving alchemical tools. They were so well protected that even the Avada Kedavra curse could be withstood for several shots. With such formidable defenses, even the most cowardly would find the courage to fight, let alone desperados like them. Upon hearing Ariana's words, the ghosts fell silent. Instead, their figures gradually emerged from the mist, floating eerily in the air. They were all draped in blood-red cloaks, obscuring their faces and making them difficult to identify. Ariana noted that these individuals hadn't drawn their wands, which was unusual given that a battle was imminent. "Be careful, these people may not be wizards," Ariana cautioned. Her words were clearly heard by the opposition. "I already admire you a little. Yes, we are indeed not mere wizards," came the reply. "Then what are you?" Ariana inquired. "More advanced life forms. Of course, no matter how much I explain, you lesser beings wouldn't understand. It's better if—" Before he could finish, Ariana interrupted with a swift, "Avada Kedavra!" Her sudden attack marked the beginning of the battle. The members of the fourth natural disaster, mounted on their broomsticks, sprang into action. As they soared through the air, they launched killing curses at their preselected targets. Buzz! Blood-red magical shields materialized in front of the figures in red cloaks, effortlessly blocking all the incoming curses. Ariana was taken aback. For a moment, she thought this was Blake's supreme magic, but upon closer inspection, she realized it was a brand new form of magic, seemingly on par with supreme magic, something she had never seen before and that Blake had never mentioned. "Be careful, everyone. Stay alert and maintain formation." Ariana, realizing their sneak attack had been thwarted and anticipating a counterattack, quickly issued a warning. As expected, the figure in the red cloak changed his stance, holding a blood-red magic shield in his left hand while slowly raising his right. The next moment, countless red beams, akin to lasers, shot from their palms towards the members of the fourth natural disaster. No one dared to face such an attack of unknown power head-on. They all maneuvered their brooms to dodge. However, Ariana couldn't dodge. Doing so would leave the carriage below her, and the fairy gold it contained, vulnerable. Moreover, she believed she didn't need to dodge. With a flick of her left hand, a delicate silver shield spun out, intercepting all attacks aimed at the carriage before automatically returning to Ariana's side. It then continued to orbit her, ready to deflect any further assaults. Ariana examined the scars on the shield, feeling a surge of relief. This attack can be blocked by the iron armor curse. The enemy's assault, though menacing in appearance, was relatively weak. Ariana surmised this was merely a probing attack. Pah! A member of the fourth natural disaster deliberately intercepted a red beam with the iron armor curse, resulting in only a minor crack on the protective spell. Realizing the opponent's attack was less formidable than anticipated, the members of the fourth natural disaster resumed their counterattack with renewed confidence. Whoosh, whoosh! Green and red lights danced across the sea, illuminating the night with their fierce exchange. Spells zipped through the air like a torrential downpour, creating a chaotic battlefield. Amidst this turmoil, the goblins aboard the carriage were visibly shaken, their fear palpable. This wasn't a reflection of cowardice, but rather a consequence of their compromised position. Confined to the carriage, their combat effectiveness was significantly diminished. The axes they wielded with deadly precision on solid ground now remained unused at their sides. Edgar, having somehow managed to climb atop the carriage, found himself in a precarious situation. Clinging for dear life to the carriage's edge, he had narrowly avoided being thrown off during a particularly violent shake. Ariana, on the other hand, moved with an almost ethereal grace, her feet barely touching the carriage as she navigated the chaos. Another member of their group, initially observing from a distance, had since joined the fray on his broom, leaving the goblin guards as the sole occupants of the carriage. Tasked with the carriage's control, they found themselves unable to join the battle. "Everyone, scatter!" Edgar's command, born out of desperation, echoed amidst the chaos. The goblins on the other carriages, struggling to maintain their grip amidst the violent shaking, attempted to retaliate with their crossbows. However, their shots were wildly inaccurate, nearly hitting their allies, the members of the Fourth Natural Disaster, who were engaged in aerial combat. "Just stay put and don't interfere. Wait for my command." Ariana's voice cut through the din, her frustration evident. "Why should I listen to you?" Edgar retorted, his anger matching hers. "Then perish here." Ariana shot back, her form dissolving into a wisp of smoke as she charged towards the enemy. Materializing amidst the red-cloaked figures, she unleashed a barrage of lightning spells. The sky lit up as bolts of lightning struck down more than a dozen of the red-cloaked assailants, sending them plummeting to the ground. The members of the Fourth Natural Disaster, buoyed by Ariana's successful assault, intensified their attacks, determined to eliminate the persistent threat. However, the situation took an unexpected turn when the figures of the fallen enemies halted mid-air, only to reveal their true forms as they tore open their cloaks. Monstrous beings with green faces, fangs, and bat wings emerged, shocking everyone on the battlefield. A scream pierced the air, snapping everyone back to reality. A member of the Fourth Natural Disaster had been caught off guard and was struck down, losing consciousness and falling from the sky. "Be careful, everyone. He should be fine," Ariana called out, her voice carrying a mix of concern and reassurance. True to her words, the fallen member vanished in a burst of blue light, a safety measure enacted by the emergency escape device each member carried. Designed by Blake, these devices would activate upon the wearer's incapacitation or near death, safely transporting them back to the Fourth Natural Disaster's base, where medical facilities and potions awaited. With the knowledge that their fallen comrade was out of immediate danger, the remaining members of the Fourth Natural Disaster renewed their efforts, fighting with renewed vigor. Meanwhile, the enemy, emboldened by their revealed monstrous forms, tore off their red cloaks, their combat prowess seemingly doubling. The winged monsters presented a formidable challenge, their aerial advantage clear. Ariana and her team, known as the Fourth Natural Disaster, found themselves more adept at aerial combat than the average wizard on a broomstick. However, it wasn't long before they began to suffer losses. As each member was teleported back to safety, their numbers dwindled. Ariana quickly realized the flaw in her strategy. She had assumed their adversaries were wizards, and thus had chosen to keep the battle airborne. It became clear that their foes were not wizards at all. "Regroup! Cover me!" Ariana commanded, swiftly descending towards the sea. Her remaining teammates rallied around her. It was evident that their attackers were not after the goblin gold. Ignoring the goblin carriages, the creatures pursued Ariana as she made her descent. These beasts had tough hides and powerful wings, rendering them impervious to most curses thrown by the Fourth Natural Disaster. Only the Avada Kedavra curse seemed to slow them, as they used their wings to shield themselves. This revelation startled Ariana. The creatures could block the deadly curse with their wings, which were part of their bodies. Without further contemplation, Ariana landed on the water's surface, standing as if on solid ground. Utilizing the distraction provided by her team, she whispered a spell, and the sea beneath her feet began to freeze at an astonishing rate. A fiery red light emanated from the ring on her index finger, hidden beneath her sleeve. In mere seconds, a vast expanse of ice, the size of a football field, formed on the sea surface. Upon Ariana's unspoken command, her team landed on the newly formed ice. Freed from the need to maneuver broomsticks, their combat effectiveness soared. Spells that were too risky to use in the air for fear of friendly fire were now unleashed with abandon. Thunderbolt explosions and shattering curses filled the air, targeting the enemy above. The explosive curse proved particularly effective against the creatures, causing more damage to their wings than the death curse. The aerial attackers hesitated, wary of approaching the wizards who had no intention of taking flight again. A tense standoff ensued. Ariana's attention was fixed on a figure in a red cloak who had yet to reveal their monstrous form. Her eyes were filled with caution. The figure in the red cloak finally spoke, acknowledging the wizard's prowess before descending from the sky and landing on the ice with a force that caused it to crack. Ariana was taken aback by the physical strength of these creatures, which surpassed even that of a fire dragon. "I thought victory would be easy, but I see now I was mistaken," the figure in the red cloak admitted, transforming his cloak into a thick, blood-red mist that gathered in his hand. With a sudden motion, he launched a blazing red light towards Ariana. With a grim expression, Ariana quickly raised her wand, the ring of power on her finger glowing brightly in response. With a resounding boom, a blazing red light erupted from Ariana's wand, hurtling towards the figure in the red cloak. As the two streams of red energy collided, a massive shockwave erupted, sending everyone in the vicinity, including the airborne monsters, reeling. Even the two thestral-drawn carriages, parked quietly on the icy ground, were overturned by the force of the blast. As the blinding light began to fade, visibility returned, revealing Ariana and the figure in the red cloak still standing defiantly opposite each other. For the first time, a hint of emotion crept into the cloaked figure's voice. "This is impossible. How can a wizard withstand my attack?" The question was posed not out of arrogance, but genuine disbelief. The power of the attack had been evident to all. None but Ariana seemed capable of withstanding such might. Ariana responded with a faint smile, her tone laced with a hint of mockery. "Why do you consider your attacks to be very powerful?" The red cloak's silence was palpable, his anger almost tangible in the air. Ariana's provocation had clearly struck a nerve. "Now that you've had your turn, shall I take mine?" Ariana said, her voice calm as she raised her wand. In the next moment, the air around her shimmered as countless ice crystals began to form, quickly shaping into razor-sharp needles enveloped in flames. The monsters on the opposing side recoiled, not from the ice, but from the fearsome red flames that danced along the needles' edges. Ariana had imbued the ice needles with Gubrathian fire, a flame far more terrifying than any ordinary blaze. Even these formidable creatures, known for their resilience, dared not face such a threat head-on. Without further ado, Ariana unleashed the fiery barrage. The ice needles, though simple in form, became deadly projectiles with the addition of the Gubrathian fire. The red cloak managed to resist momentarily with a shield of blood-red energy, but the other monsters had no choice but to attempt a hasty retreat. It was a futile effort. There, screams filled the air as several were engulfed in flames and plummeted from the sky. Ariana, slightly annoyed, remarked, "Had I known you were so vulnerable to fire, I would have used Gubrathian fire from the start." With a wave of her wand, she summoned another volley of ice needles, ready to launch. The surviving monsters, now visibly desperate, realized they had grossly underestimated the wizards. They had not anticipated that a single witch could withstand their strongest warrior's attack and turn the tide with such devastatingly effective magic. Ariana's mastery over her spells, transforming simple ice needles into lethal weapons, had taken them by surprise. They had thought Ariana's prowess might rival that of Dumbledore, but they were mistaken. Her combat abilities far exceeded their expectations, surpassing even those of her legendary brother. Remarkable. They conceded, but this is the extent of it. Chapter 483. Blake, Count Dracula? A formidable opponent. In the midst of a dense fog, a figure draped in a blood-red cloak emerged once more. At first glance, this figure seemed no different from the previous red-cloaked individuals. However, Ariana's expression immediately turned grave. The dangerous aura emanating from this newcomer was palpable, transforming the foggy atmosphere into one of impending doom. It was as though a predatory beast had stepped out of the mist, its presence alone enough to instill fear. This was no ordinary foe. Even a wizard of Ariana's caliber could sense the imminent threat. The man in the initial red cloak bowed his head and stepped aside, acknowledging the superiority of the newcomer. In response, Ariana launched an attack, directing a barrage of ice needles towards the figure like a torrential downpour. Yet this time, the airborne monsters did not scatter as before. The reason became clear when the newcomer in the red cloak merely raised a hand, causing the ice needles to freeze in midair, as if time itself had halted around them. Ariana's frown deepened upon realizing her loss of control over the spell. Touching a small bag tied around her waist, a precautionary gift from Blake, which she had hoped to avoid using, Ariana understood that Blake had anticipated a formidable challenge. With a simple clench of his fist, the man in the red cloak extinguished all flames enveloping the ice needles, which then shattered into a fine powder, blanketing the ground. The onlookers were stunned into silence, witnessing the swift reversal of fortunes. "Ms. Dumbledore, let's withdraw," someone suggested, recognizing the difficulty of overcoming such a powerful adversary. Escape seemed feasible, but the goblins' commission now seemed a distant concern, especially under the suspicion that these enemies were summoned by the goblins themselves. Ariana, however, remained resolute. "No, we can't leave yet." She understood the stakes. The monsters were likely minions of Chaos Wish, a force Blake had been meticulously planning against. Fleeing would render their efforts futile. The man in the red cloak then revealed his identity, removing his hood to unveil a fair and handsome face. He addressed Ariana with a courteous bow. "Miss Dumbledore, why should such a beautiful lady trouble herself so?" Ariana, bypassing his comment, inquired, "Who are you?" The man apologized for his earlier lack of introduction. "I'm sorry for my rudeness. My name is Dracula, Count Dracula." Ariana was taken aback. "You mean you are the legendary vampire, Count Dracula?" She recalled the name from Muggle literature Blake had shared. Dracula's pleasure was evident. "Oh, you're familiar with my name? It's curious. My reputation seems more pronounced in the Muggle world than among wizards. Knowing you're aware of my identity delights me." Ariana's response was cold. "Delighted? It's as if you consider us friends. What I detest most are those who, despite being foes, cloak their intentions in politeness and feigned friendliness. It's sheer hypocrisy." "Is that your true nature, Mr. Vampire?" she challenged. Dracula glanced at the surrounding monsters, then, with a shrug, admitted, "In truth, my real form is far more formidable than these creatures. But I doubt you'd wish to see it. Everyone who has deeply regrets it. Okay, Miss Dumbledore, the reason we are here this time. I invite you to my castle as a guest," Dracula proposed. "If you agree to accompany me, I will ensure the safety of these people and the goblins. What do you say?" Ariana's gaze flickered with thought. "So you're essentially the most powerful figure on your side." "The most powerful?" Dracula paused, momentarily confused before he grasped her meaning. With a smile, he confirmed, "Yes, I am the most powerful. So, have you made your decision? Will you come with me willingly, or must we defeat you first?" Ariana responded with a smile of her own. "It's unfortunate that your words carry weight, but mine do not, because I'm not the most powerful on our side." She then retrieved a small box from her bag, pressing a button on its top firmly. Given that Dracula had revealed himself, it was time to utilize the backup plan provided by Blake. Despite Dracula's unexpected appearance, his arrogance made sense. Even if he wasn't the ultimate adversary, his formidable combat skills justified the use of the backup plan. As Ariana pressed the button, a ripple spread visibly through the air in all directions. Dracula, cautious, conjured a blood-red shield to protect himself and his minions, but the ripple passed through harmlessly. "What did you do?" Dracula inquired, puzzled. Before Ariana could reply, the sound of footsteps echoed through the void. Everyone present scanned their surroundings, searching for the source. The footsteps, originating from behind Ariana, grew louder and closer until a tall man in black robes and a skull mask emerged from the ripples in the air. Despite his intimidating appearance, Ariana recognized him immediately. The man in the black robe was Blake, her ally and the leader of the fourth natural disaster. "The person you wished to meet has arrived," Ariana announced with a grin. "He goes by Count Dracula, a vampire." Blake, surprised, examined the red-faced boy opposite him. "This is truly incredible," he remarked, his voice altered by magic. After capturing an unusual vampire, Blake had harbored suspicions. Unfortunately, his experiments had scrambled the vampire's memories, delaying the revelation of his adversary's identity. "So, you're Miss Dumbledore's superior, the most powerful on our side?" Dracula inquired. Blake nodded. "Yes, that's one way to put it." Dracula laughed. "I see. Miss Dumbledore is connected to you. You're the fourth natural disaster, the group that robbed Gringotts." At Dracula's words, the goblins who had been hiding showed visible alarm. The realization that their rescuers were also the culprits behind their recent troubles filled them with dread. Regardless of the outcome of the confrontation between the two factions, the goblins feared for their safety, now aware of the true identities of both parties. "I must emphasize one last time," Blake began, addressing the tense situation with a gravity that underscored the critical moment they all faced. "We did not rob Gringotts," Blake stated calmly. Dracula responded with a smile. Okay, as long as you're happy." It was clear he didn't believe Blake's words. "So that means you're the mastermind behind Chaos Wish?" The fairies standing behind everyone turned pale, their anxiety palpable. It seemed both parties were attempting to unmask each other, aware that the more they discovered, the quicker their demise might come. "Yes, that's me," Dracula admitted. "All right, if that's the case, then you'll just have to come back with me. Don't worry, as long as you accompany me, I'll ensure the creatures surrounding you disperse." Blake offered softly, echoing Dracula's earlier sentiment, but with a twist. "So, you must be quite skilled, Mr. Skull?" Dracula retorted, skepticism lacing his tone. "You're aware, of course, that I can't simply acquiesce to your request." "It seems our confrontation is inevitable, then," Dracula concluded, raising his hand as a blood-red light swirled around it. Blake, without reaching for his wand, also raised his hand, summoning a thick black mist that formed a skull in his palm. The skull's eyes glowed a menacing green, presenting a ghastly sight. Dracula, observing the skull, felt a flicker of fear. The skull exuded a dangerously potent aura. "Go." At Dracula's command, the red mist transformed into a massive red bat that charged at Blake. As it moved, the mist left deep marks on the ice below. Blake countered by raising the black skull, which opened its mouth to release a black mist that enveloped the red bat like a tongue. The bat struggled futilely against the mist's grasp, quickly losing its strength and eventually being consumed by the skull. The green glow in the skull's eyes intensified, indicating Dracula's disadvantage in this initial exchange. However, Dracula remained unfazed, recognizing his attack as merely a probe. "Very well, now it's my turn," Blake declared, raising the skull again. In the next moment, the skull's eyes flashed green, and he unleashed a powerful spell. A huge black six-pointed star formation appeared on the ice, its strange runes flickering ominously. Dracula, wary of Blake's capabilities, prepared to interrupt the spell. This wasn't a turn-based game, after all. He conjured a massive blood orb and launched it towards the six-pointed star formation. The orb split into multiple cells, creating a rain of blood that enveloped the formation. The black energy surged, attempting to resist the onslaught of blood rain. The rain corroded the black mist, gradually weakening it. Just as the six-pointed star formation seemed on the verge of destruction, a shadowy figure emerged from within it, a slender ghost donning a black cloak, wielding a bright scythe. This figure bore an uncanny resemblance to the legendary Grim Reaper, its eerie aura sending shivers down everyone's spine. Except for Blake and Dracula, everyone instinctively stepped back at the sight. With a swift motion, the ghostly figure cleared the sky of blood rain and black mist. Then it charged towards Dracula, closing the distance in an instant. The scythe slashed horizontally at Dracula's waist. "Stop!" Dracula commanded, facing the imminent threat head-on. Raising his hand with a calm demeanor, Dracula managed to halt the swift movements of the God of Death in midair. A flash of blood-red light ensued, and the God of Death dissipated into thin air. The monsters behind Dracula erupted into cheers at the sight. However, despite his outward calm, Dracula was inwardly on high alert. Hidden beneath his sleeve, his right hand throbbed with severe pain, a constant reminder of the peculiar and formidable abilities of his opponent. The curse associated with the God of Death was unlike anything he had encountered before. His right hand, which had transformed into its true form to scratch the god of death, was corroded to the bone by the curse. Were it not for his unmatched self-healing ability, constantly counteracting the curse, his entire body would have dissolved. Having lived for centuries, Dracula had never come across such a spell. The telepathy of a vampire? Blake remarked with a hint of admiration. It seems you possess considerable skill as well. Then, let's take our next encounter more seriously. The god of death had been the least powerful of Blake's necromantic attacks. Previous vampires had fallen easily to it, yet Dracula had resisted using his vampiric powers. Blake's eyes gleamed with excitement at the prospect of a challenging opponent. To him, Dracula was an ideal adversary to test his skills against. Although he had decided to limit himself to using only his more obscure undead magic to keep his identity concealed and in line with his personality, Blake was eager to fully engage in this battle. From a distance, Dracula frowned, troubled by the realization that the formidable attack was merely a preliminary test. And there was something unsettling about Blake's expression. Was that a look of enjoyment? The notion that his opponent found pleasure in the prospect of their battle was both perplexing and alarming. Chapter 484, Melee Combat? As a magician, I'm really not suited for such advanced combat skills. Interesting, Dracula remarked with a calm demeanor. In the next moment, the sky was engulfed in a scarlet mist, and Dracula's figure vanished entirely. It was the vampire's invisibility magic, but Dracula's mastery far surpassed that of Winsty's father. There was not a single trace left behind. Without the eye of truth, which could see through all illusions, Blake would have been forced to resort to his most powerful spells. Blake scanned his surroundings and, sure enough, detected subtle magical traces approaching him from behind. A flash of red light later, Dracula's right hand transformed into a dark claw, aiming straight for Blake's heart from behind. With a swift motion, the sharp claws pierced through Blake's back and emerged from his chest. The monsters around them erupted in cheers. However, Dracula's expression turned grave when he realized he hadn't grasped anything tangible. Blake's figure had turned into black mist at the last moment. Dracula, looking at his sizzling claws, was so infuriated that he nearly shattered his teeth. Blake was covered in countless curses, much to Dracula's dismay. Just as Dracula's anger flared, he vanished once more. Where he had disappeared, two gleaming scythes swept past. Had Dracula been any slower, he would have been cleaved in two. Unbeknownst to Dracula, the black six-pointed star circle on the ground where Blake had been standing had not yet faded. Without Dracula's notice, two more Reapers had emerged. A red light flashed, and the two Reapers vanished into thin air once again. Learning from his previous mistake, Dracula refrained from attacking with his hands and instead drew a blood-red knife. The material of the knife was unknown, but it effortlessly dispatched the two Reapers without sustaining any damage. Realizing his knife could counter Blake's curses, Dracula, without hesitation, launched another attack on Blake, who had reformed some distance away. Along the way, he destroyed the magic circle on the ground. His speed was so incredible that everyone present could barely track his movements. However, for Blake, it wasn't fast enough. Blake vanished from his spot once again, and Dracula's knife sliced through yet another black shadow. "Are you just going to run away?" Dracula finally managed to dispel the curse that had been attached to his hand. Despite priding himself on his elegance and composure, he was now visibly irritated by Blake's elusive tactics. "Mr. Vampire, please respect my profession. I am a magician. How can any magician excel in close combat?" Blake retorted from a distance. Dracula realized that Blake was wary of his physical combat prowess. After all, as a vampire, Dracula's physical capabilities far exceeded those of the so-called wizards. It made sense for Blake to maintain distance. However, Dracula also deduced something crucial from this exchange. Blake's physical form was likely inferior to his own. If he could close the distance, victory would be assured. Yet the pursuit seemed endless and fruitless. Dracula glanced at Ariana and the wizards behind her, a sly smile forming on his lips. "Now that I have my answer, Miss Dumbledore, you've become expendable." With that, the red mist surrounding Dracula exploded, transforming into countless blood-red bats that swiftly attacked Ariana and the others. The corrosive power of the red mist was well known. Contact meant certain death. Ariana raised her wand, and a transparent shield instantly formed, enveloping her and her companions. The wizards behind her also sprang into action, their wands raised. Blue-white light emanated from the tips of their wands, strengthening the shield above them. The shield's glow intensified, signifying a significant boost in its defensive capabilities. As countless blood-red bats collided with the shield, they dispersed, turning back into a blood mist that enveloped the area. The sky above was tumultuous. The once solid shield that protected Ariana and her companions only lasted a brief moment before it began to tremble violently, succumbing to the intense corrosion as if it were on the verge of shattering. The goblins trailing behind were left unprotected. Seizing the moment, Edgar shouted, "Hide behind them!" Without hesitation, the goblins scurried to take cover behind Ariana and the others, throwing themselves to the ground. The blood-red bats, fixated on Ariana and her group, ignored the goblins, sparing them from harm. Blake, observing the precarious situation from a distance, quickly deduced Dracula's strategy. He realized that Dracula was attempting to draw him into close combat by targeting his allies. Noticing that Ariana and her companions were still holding their ground, Blake decided against rushing to their aid. Instead, he focused on the black skull in his grasp, which once again emitted a green glow from its eyes. As the eerie light bathed Dracula's minions below, a peculiar sound echoed from above, reminiscent of a colossal stone door creaking open. True to the sound's implication, a majestic stone gate materialized above the monsters, adorned with countless bizarre demonic reliefs. The chains that once bound the gate had been undone, allowing the two massive doors to swing open fully. The appearance of the gate was so foreboding that it was impossible to see what lay beyond its dark threshold. The monsters, realizing too late the danger the gate posed, found themselves immobilized as if the air around them had transformed into a viscous substance. None managed to escape before the gate was fully opened. In a desperate attempt to protect his forces, Dracula unleashed a powerful red curse towards the gate. However, his efforts were futile. The gate remained unshaken. Blake, with a smirk, snapped his fingers. Instantly, blood-red chains erupted from the gate, ensnaring the paralyzed monsters and binding them tightly. Before a stunned Dracula could react, the monsters were dragged into the abyss of the gate, disappearing without a trace. In a bold move, a chain lashed out towards Dracula himself. He narrowly avoided capture by transforming into mist, though the chain managed to ensnare a portion of his blood, eliciting a scream of agony from him. The chains then retracted, and the stone gate began to close, eventually vanishing into thin air under Dracula's furious gaze. Turning to face Blake, Dracula's eyes seethed with blood-red fury. Blake, having dispersed the blood-red bats, stood calmly before his allies. "Impressive, isn't it?" "Unfortunately, it's a move I can only use once a day," he remarked, a hint of regret in his voice as he noticed a crack forming on the skull. "What have you done to them?" Dracula demanded, his tone grave. "Sent them through the gate to hell. Where else?" Blake replied with a sly smile. "Gate to hell? Nonsense," Dracula retorted, disbelief evident in his voice. "I've told you before, I'm a necromancer. Opening a gate to hell shouldn't come as a surprise. But let's be honest, given the atrocities your kind has committed, hell is precisely where they belong," Blake stated calmly, his gaze unwavering. Meanwhile, the shield protecting Ariana and the others began to strengthen, a clear indication that Blake was not only a formidable necromancer, but also a guardian willing to go to great lengths to protect his allies. Empowered by his own fury, Dracula shed his red cloak, revealing a pair of blue-gray wings that unfurled slowly from his back. His skin shifted from fair to a blue-gray hue, and his once handsome features twisted grotesquely, morphing into a visage of green skin and sharp fangs. "Well, your true colors are finally showing," Blake remarked with a hint of mockery. "Death," Dracula hissed, vanishing from sight, only to reappear instantaneously in front of Blake. With a swift, brutal motion, he struck Blake with his sharp claw, sending him hurtling through the air and crashing into the sea with a loud splash. Dracula, wearing a ferocious smile, effortlessly shattered Ariana's shield as if it were mere pape, leaving her and her companions utterly vulnerable. "I warned you, you wouldn't want to see me like this. In this form, my desire to kill becomes uncontrollable." You fragile beings cannot begin to comprehend my power, Dracula declared, his voice cold and devoid of emotion as he lunged at Ariana with his claw. Armor for protection. Create barriers. Ariana and her companions cast spells in desperation, but their efforts were futile against Dracula's might. His claw seemed to grow larger as it neared Ariana, but suddenly Dracula vanished from her sight, only to be seen moments later, knocked back by an unseen force. Recovering, Dracula saw Blake standing defiantly before him, disbelief etched across his face. The wizard he had deemed weak had managed to repel him with sheer physical force. Impossible. With such strength, why did you resort to evasion earlier? Dracula questioned, barely containing his rage. Well, I truly am not adept at close combat. My knowledge of melee is minimal. How could I, a mere magician, excel in such a field? Blake responded, his tone casual as he drew a sword from his robe. It was Gryffindor's sword, though its appearance was altered to conceal its true identity, even from the keen eyes of the elves observing from a distance. A little understanding? Dracula scoffed, finding the notion absurd given Blake's evident physical prowess. Refocusing, Dracula noticed a flash of white light as Blake advanced with the sword, closing the distance between them in a heartbeat. Dracula raised his claw to block the incoming blade, resulting in a loud clang of metal against hardened skin. The two figures, one shrouded in black and the other in red, clashed fiercely, their battle illuminated by intermittent flashes of white and red light. Meanwhile, Ariana noticed several goblins attempting to discreetly board a carriage. "Where do you think you're going?" she demanded, her voice icy. Edgar, one of the goblins, felt a surge of despair. They had hoped to escape unnoticed while the battle raged, aware that once the dust settled, they would likely face retribution for their knowledge of the events. "You can't leave. Did you really think I was unaware of your intentions?" Ariana's gaze then shifted to another goblin, her eyes sharp. "And you, did you think you could sneak attack me with that wand hidden up your sleeve?" The goblin was taken aback, his plan to attack Ariana during her moment of vulnerability foiled by the unexpected intervention of the formidable figure by her side. "Wand? What wand?" Edgar feigned ignorance, his voice laced with surprise. "Do it," Ariana commanded, her tone leaving no room for negotiation, as she prepared to confront the goblin's treachery head-on. Egg was taken aback as his colleague unexpectedly revealed a wand hidden in his sleeve, ready to defend himself. The sight was shocking. While goblins were capable of using wands, such practices were strictly prohibited by wizards. The sudden appearance of a wand in a goblin's hand indicated a serious problem at hand. Despite their readiness to resist, the goblins stood no chance against the formidable presence of numerous powerful wizards. It wasn't long before they were all apprehended. After ensuring the goblins were under control, Ariana's gaze shifted back to the distant battle, where her concern deepened. She watched as Blake engaged in combat with a figure shrouded in darkness. It was rare for her to see Blake locked in a struggle for so long. She knew Blake had many abilities he had yet to employ, yet the fact that Dracula could match him blow for blow was astonishing. However, the reality of their duel was not as evenly matched as it appeared. In the obscured chaos of their fight, Blake had repeatedly managed to slice through Dracula's formidable physique with his razor-sharp sword. Without Dracula's extraordinary ability to heal, he would have been vanquished long ago. Ariana couldn't help but scoff at the thought. Dracula had once modestly claimed he knew only a little about hand-to-hand combat, yet he was, holding his own against Blake. Despite the pain of his injuries, Dracula was confident in his victory. His assurance stemmed from his unmatched healing abilities. He believed that eventually Blake would tire, his strength would wane, and he would be left with no option but to face his demise, while Dracula could continuously regenerate. Dracula's strategy relied on endurance, believing his resilience would outlast Blake's vigor. In his mind, victory was inevitable, as he possessed the unique advantage of healing, a factor he was certain would lead him to triumph in the end. Chapter 485, The Eye of Agamotto. Blake was elated. No adversary had ever managed to withstand his onslaught for such an extended period. This prolonged battle allowed him to unleash his combative spirit to its fullest. However, he wasn't entirely satisfied. After all, he was only employing undead magic, and the basic melee skills from the junior Gandalf template he had initially adopted. He hadn't yet tapped into the full extent of his powers. Suddenly, Blake noticed a significant shift in his opponent's strategy. The counterattacks, once fierce and relentless, had dwindled to mere defensive maneuvers. Reflecting on this change, Blake quickly deduced the rationale behind it. Given the size disparity, it was inherently more challenging for his opponent to defend. Engaging in an offensive battle offered no advantage and only resulted in substantial losses. It seemed more strategic to focus on defense, conserving energy for a decisive counterstrike. Blake had to admit, Dracula's approach was astute. His remarkable self-healing ability posed a considerable challenge. No matter the intensity or location of the attack, Dracula would recover in mere seconds. Blake surmised that this regenerative capability wasn't without its costs, likely draining physical strength or something similar. By adopting a defensive stance, Dracula aimed to minimize injuries and, by extension, reduce physical exertion. Simultaneously, he hoped to provoke Blake into escalating his offensive, thereby depleting his own reserves. When Blake's energy was nearly spent, it would present the perfect opportunity for Dracula to launch a counteroffensive. However, now that Blake had unraveled his opponent's strategy, he had no intention of playing into his hands. Moreover, Dracula had grossly underestimated Blake. If the goal was to exhaust him, Dracula would find it a Herculean task, especially given Blake's enhanced physical condition. "All right, I've had my fun," Blake declared, his tone casual. Dracula's eyes widened in shock as he realized Blake's speed had dramatically increased. Before he could react, his claws were firmly grasped by Blake's hands. Struggling to free himself, Dracula discovered to his dismay that Blake's strength had also surged. Had he been holding back all this while? As Blake pinned Dracula's claws, laughter echoed from beneath the skull mask. Dracula, frustrated, extended the sharp wings on his back, aiming for Blake's chest. To his astonishment, Blake's black robe reacted, not only blocking the attack, but also entangling his wings, rendering him immobile. It was Blake's levitating cloak, which had altered its appearance to thwart the attack. Dracula was taken aback. His attack had been foiled by mere fabric. It was then that he noticed a brilliant golden light emanating from the empty eye sockets of Blake's skull mask, filling him with a profound sense of dread. His instincts screamed for him to flee, but his vampire magic failed him, leaving him unable to transform into a mist and escape. In an instant, two intense golden beams shot from Blake's eyes, striking Dracula squarely in the head. A piercing scream filled the air, as half of Dracula's head was obliterated by the power of Blake's true eye, the flesh and blood at the wound dissolving. Blake released his grip, and the levitating cloak unfurled from Dracula's wings. The headless body of Dracula crumpled to the ground. Though not dead, the damage to his brain severely impeded his regenerative abilities, slowing his recovery significantly. Without intervention, Dracula could eventually restore his brain, but Blake's decisive blow had left him incapacitated, a mere shadow of the formidable adversary he once was. Blake's remarkable self-healing ability was about to kick in, promising his recovery and return to combat. However, Blake had no intention of allowing such a resurgence. With a casual flick of his wrist, he summoned a cascade of bright red flames that descended upon Dracula's prone form. The fire erupted with a resounding boom, engulfing Dracula in a fierce inferno. Despite Dracula's instinctual efforts to regenerate, his healing powers paled in comparison to the relentless destruction wrought by the flames. Blake's mastery over fire was evident. The flames consumed Dracula without so much as scorching the ice beneath. In moments, all that remained of Dracula was a mound of dark ashes. Blake, satisfied with his work, was about to leave when a glint of red caught his eye among the remains. Curious, he approached and with a simple gesture scattered the ashes to reveal a blood-red knife and a crimson bead. The bead, pulsating with a vibrant vitality, floated towards Blake as he beckoned it closer. Intrigued by the energy it radiated, Blake pondered if this bead was the source of Dracula's formidable healing ability. Upon closer inspection, he noticed a word engraved on the bead: Tower. The meaning was unclear, but the bead's power was undeniable. Deciding to study it further, Blake pocketed the bead and turned his attention to the knife. Its immunity to curses had been evident during the battle, and upon examination, Blake realized its curse was far more potent than any it repelled. Recognizing its potential value, he carefully stored the knife away. Ariana approached, her gaze falling on the ashes that once were Dracula. The sight filled her with dread, a stark reminder of the fate she might have faced without Blake's intervention. "Can I leave the rest to you?" Blake inquired, his tone indicating the shift of responsibility. Ariana nodded in agreement, understanding the gravity of the situation. Blake, with a meaningful look, advised, "From now on, Ariana should not be seen outside." The implication was clear. Dracula's knowledge of Ariana's identity posed a risk, and the mysterious tower engraved on the bead only deepened Blake's concerns. With his advice imparted, Blake vanished into the shadows, leaving Ariana to marvel at his dramatic exit. Ariana returned to the fairies, her youthful appearance restored, eliciting shock and fear from the goblins. Their reaction only intensified as Ariana hinted at the consequences of their colleagues' actions. The goblins, particularly eager, were desperate for explanations, equally in the dark about the day's events. Meanwhile, Blake reappeared in Hogwarts, his disguise shed for his familiar school uniform. He made his way to his office, where Hermione and Cassandra were engrossed in their studies. His decision against teleporting directly into the office was a courtesy, sparing them the shock. Cassandra's casual inquiry about his whereabouts was met with a nonchalant response. Blake had established a rigorous academic regimen for them, challenging yet achievable with the aid of magical aids like the Soul Lantern and Moonflower. Blake had mastered the art of assigning just enough work to push Cassandra and Hermione to their limits. Despite their use of the Soul Lantern and Moonflower, they struggled to complete the daily tasks he set for them. Cassandra, visibly frustrated, exclaimed, "This is too much. The workload you're giving us every day is overwhelming." Blake, unfazed, responded, "Overwhelming? I'm merely asking you to memorize 10 books and write 50 papers every day." Cassandra retorted, feeling the pressure. "That's the workload of 2 school years for most people." "I have no choice," Blake replied earnestly. "I've made a promise to Professor McGonagall. If you don't achieve outstanding in all your Hogwarts exams, my salary will be cut. Imagine how dreadful that would be for me, especially since I haven't even started working yet." Hermione, who had been quietly working, suddenly spoke up. "Cassandra, if you find it too challenging, you're free to leave. With all the assistance you're getting, do you really find it difficult? You should know that Blake wrote all those 50-plus papers himself." Cassandra was momentarily speechless. Indeed, upon closer inspection, the handwriting on the papers confirmed they were all penned by Blake. This meant he had to prepare 100 papers early every morning, in a ditty, on to selecting appropriate books for them. Moreover, Blake corrects the papers we submit from the previous day and takes the time to explain our mistakes individually. "You can't imagine the effort he puts in," Hermione continued, her focus unwavering from her work. Blake, pleased with Hermione's understanding, affectionately ruffled her hair, further disheveling it. "Oh, Hermione, at least you appreciate my efforts, unlike some people." Cassandra, initially wanting to express her anger, realized Hermione's point was valid. "Fine, I admit I was wrong. I'm sorry," she conceded, though she couldn't resist glaring at Hermione as she added, "Granger, I'm not leaving." Hermione, undistracted by the exchange, simply replied, "Then you must work harder," her quill never pausing. Blake, feeling a mix of amusement and exhaustion, announced, "I'm heading to bed. You two can leave whenever you're finished. I'm quite tired today." As he made his way to his bedroom, Cassandra and Hermione exchanged puzzled looks, sensing something was amiss. They knew Blake must have been out dealing with matters beyond Hogwarts, especially since this was the first time they saw him this exhausted. After a refreshing bath, Blake collapsed into bed, reflecting on the day's exhilarating yet exhausting battle against Dracula. Despite his desire to capture Dracula alive, the formidable opponent's strength only allowed for a regrettable outcome, his death. Following a deep 8-hour sleep, a rarity for someone of Blake's physical caliber, he awoke to find his pet, Shoo Shoo, offering him a plate of steaming lamb chops, kept warm by a spell likely cast by Hermione, as indicated by the note left with the meal. The note read, "You slept soundly, so we didn't call you for dinner. However, I still left the meal you mentioned wanting yesterday, the lamb chops. Wally cast a warming charm on it. I just hope her magic was sufficient. Otherwise, you might have been left with nothing to eat. Dabao seems to have taken it upon himself to guard your dinner, ensuring nothing else got to it first. Blake's gaze shifted from the mutton chop to Dabao, the mischievous creature that had been eyeing his dinner. The fresh knife marks on the meat were undeniable evidence of an attempted theft. Dabao, noticing Blake's scrutiny, quickly gestured and squeaked in its defense, claiming a preference for sweets over meat. However, the grease staining its mouth fur told a different story, making Blake skeptical of its innocence. Turning his attention away from Dabao, Blake focused on the note in his hand. The message was clear. The curfew time is approaching, and we must return. Please remember to eat when you wake up. Also, an owl has delivered a package for you, which you'll find on your desk. We've also completed our tasks for today. Best, Hermione Cassandra. Placing the note aside, Blake's curiosity led him to the desk by the window, where a square box awaited him. Given Dumbledore's protective measures, Blake knew that any package or letter reaching him had been thoroughly vetted for safety. The label on the package revealed it was from Nico Flamel and his wife, piquing Blake's interest even further. Eagerly, Blake opened the package to find a small box and a letter nestled inside. He unfolded the letter and began to read. Dear Blake, we are thrilled to share some wonderful news with you. We have successfully restored the blueprint you provided us, the Eye of Agamotto, and are delighted to send you the completed artifact. Upon reading these words, Blake's eyes widened in astonishment. The realization that the legendary alchemists, Nico Flamel and his wife, had not only restored but also recreated the mythical Eye of Agamotto from the blueprint he had given them was overwhelming. This artifact, steeped in magic and mystery, held untold powers, and its completion marked a significant achievement. The implications of this success were vast, and Blake couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement at the possibilities that lay ahead. With the Eye of Agamotto now in his possession, the boundaries of his magical exploration and understanding were about to expand exponentially. Chapter 486, An Unexpected Surprise, Subspace. Blake hesitated as he reached out his hand towards the small box nestled within the package. Yet, in a moment of hesitation, his hand paused midair. Refocusing his attention, Blake revisited the letter in his grasp. The blueprint, though essentially restored, can only be deemed minimally functional. Its complexity is beyond our current understanding, and despite experimenting with numerous materials, none have proven fully compatible. It appears we require materials indigenous to the blueprint's origin. Our efforts have brought us this far, and for that, I am grateful for the half of the blueprint you provided. It has unveiled a facet of alchemy, both beautiful and unexplored. Indeed, the years since our paths crossed have been filled with wonders surpassing all my previous experiences. Thank you, Blake. Additionally, this alchemical device emits a powerful ray. Our tests confirm its strength, yet its full capabilities remain a mystery. Exercise caution. The device's core is hollow, seemingly designed to house a specific item, which may be key to unlocking its true potential. Nico and Perenelle Flamel. With the letter's words echoing in his mind, Blake's resolve strengthened, and he reached for the box once more, this time with determination. Upon opening it, a palm-sized silver eye, unlike any he remembered, lay before him. Crafted by the Flamel couple from an incomplete blueprint, its form and hue were unfamiliar to Blake. Lifting the Eye of Agamotto, Blake utilized his system to decipher its functions. The Eye of Agamotto, pseudo, of blue quality, capable of emitting a weakened transformation ray once daily, it can penetrate illusions, inflicting minor damage on both corporeal beings and demons. Despite its limitations, Blake marveled at the Flamel's craftsmanship. To achieve such a feat with only half a blueprint spoke volumes of their unparalleled alchemical prowess. Holding the eye in his palm, it began to levitate, its mechanisms whirring softly. A slot revealed itself at the eye's center, awaiting the time stone. With a swift gesture, Blake activated the slot, and a brilliant green light burst forth, striking the ceiling of his bedroom and leaving a gaping hole. Amidst the chaos and the distant uproar of Mr. Filch, Blake hastily repaired the damage with a flick of his wand. In moments, the room was restored, though Blake's heart raced with the fear of discovery. A careless mistake, he mused, hoping the incident had gone unnoticed by Professor McGonagall. Despite Nico Flamel's warning of the device's power, Blake hadn't anticipated such destruction. Suddenly, a knock at the door jolted Blake from his thoughts. He opened it to find Professor McGonagall and Filch awaiting him. Their swift arrival caught him off guard. "Blake, what happened?" Professor McGonagall inquired, her tone serious. Nothing at all," Blake stammered, his response hesitant. Filch seemed eager to contradict, having witnessed the earlier spectacle, but a glance from Blake silenced him. Professor McGonagall, however, remained unconvinced. "During my night patrol, I stumbled upon your tower, only to find half of its roof blown open," Blake internally groaned, realizing the gravity of the situation as he faced Professor McGonagall, who had taken it upon herself to patrol the campus that night. Aware that his secret was out, Blake had no choice but to confess. "I'm terribly sorry, Professor. I was conducting an experiment and, well, there was a slight mishap. But I've already repaired the roof, so please don't banish me from the lab. I've only recently acquired it." Professor McGonagall peered over her glasses at Blake, who, with his impeccable acting skills, wore an expression of guilt and anxiety so convincingly that it tugged at her heartstrings. "All right, Blake, I assigned you this secluded tower for this very reason. Since you've managed to repair the damage to the castle, I'll let this incident slide. However, I expect you to exercise greater caution in your future experiments, ensuring they're conducted safely and quietly," she admonished sternly. "I promise, Professor," Blake responded earnestly. "Very well, I must be off. I still have to console the students who were disturbed by the noise," Professor McGonagall said, preparing to leave. "I didn't mean for it to happen, Professor," Blake apologized once more. After escorting Professor McGonagall and Filch out, Blake retreated to his bedroom, determined to use the mirror space for any future experiments to avoid noise complaints and structural damage. He picked up the Eye of Agamotto and stepped into the mirror space to begin his work. Unlike Nico Flamel and his wife, Blake had a complete blueprint at his disposal. He had only given the Flamels an incomplete version to prolong their lives. Now, with the blueprint finished, it was time to pass on another incomplete version to Nico LeMay and his wife. With the blueprint and his expertise in alchemy, Blake skillfully restored the Eye of Agamotto to its original glory. As dawn broke, he admired his handiwork, having spent the entire night on the project. He then accessed the system's identification feature to examine the Eye of Agamotto more closely. The Eye of Agamotto, of golden quality, possesses the ability to see through illusions, unravel dark magic, and even glimpse into the past and future. It also serves as the container for the Time Stone, Blake read, feeling a mix of apprehension and excitement at the prospect of wielding such power, especially the ability to traverse time and space. How to acquire the Time Stone, though? For the first time in many days, Blake turned his attention to the rows of boxes in his system space. After saving for so long, he had amassed numerous treasure chests. However, only those of diamond level or higher held any real value to him now, given his advanced skill set. Without hesitation, Blake began synthesizing the treasure chests in his system space, eventually discovering he had 3 supreme treasure chests and an additional 3 diamond-level chests. Despite the seemingly low number of high-level chests, after all his achievements and hoarding, Blake understood that his recent endeavors had been somewhat chaotic. Moreover, the chests obtained from ordinary wizards were mostly of bronze quality, offering little of value to someone with his capabilities. Blake stood before his collection of treasure chests, a testament to his dedication and the countless hours he had invested in his quest. The process of combining thousands of bronze chests into higher tiers was arduous, and only a few reached the pinnacle of a supreme treasure chest. With a sense of anticipation, Blake uncorked a bottle of luck potion and took a generous gulp. The cool liquid coursed through him, instantly banishing the remnants of sleep and fatigue. It had been a while since he last indulged in such a potion, and the sensation felt oddly unfamiliar yet invigorating. With a determined gesture, Blake focused on one of the supreme treasure chests. "System, open the supreme treasure chest," he commanded. A series of notifications chimed in response. Ding! The supreme treasure chest is being opened for the host, followed by, ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining a subspace. Blake paused, momentarily confused. A subspace? He had been expecting something entirely different, perhaps a time stone. Bind it, he said decisively, eager to explore this unexpected reward. As the system confirmed the binding process, Blake's curiosity grew. What exactly is this subspace? He inquired. The system explained that the subspace was a fragment of the world, mirroring the current environment but isolated as its own realm. Its size and the flow of time within were influenced by Blake's magical power. He could access it at will, grant entry to others through a spell, and even expel anyone from it if necessary. Blake was momentarily speechless, overwhelmed by the realization that he had inadvertently acquired the very thing he had longed for since awakening to the system. This subspace could have spared him the risks associated with cultivating magical plants in the Room of Requirement. Curious about how to access this new domain, Blake discovered an intricate landscape painting in his mind, alive with motion and detail. With a mere thought, he found himself transported to a vast grassland under a familiar sunrise, the real-world environment perfectly replicated in this secluded fragment. A spell materialized in his thoughts, the key to sharing this incredible space with others. This is an unexpected surprise, Blake mused, marveling at the serendipity of his discovery. Returning to his bedroom in an instant, he recited the newly acquired spell. A portal, swirling with hues of purple and red, materialized before him. So, aside from my instant access, others will need this spell to open a portal and enter the subspace, Blake concluded, already envisioning the possibilities this new world opened up for him. Chapter 487, Blake's Fan Meeting. After Blake had initially deciphered the intricacies of entering and exiting subspace, he planned to delve back into it for further exploration. His objectives were twofold. First, to ascertain the full extent of this subspace's area, and second, to investigate its native flora and fauna. Given the presence of plants, it stood to reason that other forms of life might also exist, and it was crucial to determine whether any dangerous beasts or magical creatures inhabited the area. As he was about to embark on this venture, a series of knocks interrupted his thoughts. Tuck, tuck, tuck. Reluctantly, Blake closed the subspace entrance. Utilizing his true eye, he peered through the office wall and spotted Hermione and Cassandra waiting outside. Glancing at his pocket watch, he realized it was already past 8 in the morning. "Please come in," he called out. The office door swung open automatically as Blake descended from the attic, clad in his pajamas, with his pet Sniff peeking out from a pocket. "What brings you here so early?" he inquired, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Blake, it seems something happened last night," Cassandra began, her tone laced with concern. Hermione added, "We heard a loud noise coming from your direction." Cassandra shrugged. "Our dormitory is beneath the Black Lake, so we didn't catch much of the sound." Blake ran a hand through his tousled hair. It was nothing serious. I was conducting some experiments late at night, and well, there was a slight mishap." Cassandra's worry was palpable as she quickly grasped Blake's hand. "Are you all right? We heard rumors of an explosion." "Not just any explosion. I heard the tower's roof was blown off." Hermione chimed in, her expression serious. Blake regarded her with a puzzled look. "Hermione, how did you come to know about that?" Professor McGonagall made it clear that the incident was to be kept under wraps. Hermione sighed. "In Hogwarts, nighttime wanderings aren't exclusive to you. You know, we Gryffindors, even those of us who are dating, prefer the thrill of a nocturnal adventure. It's hardly surprising that someone witnessed the tower's damage." Understanding dawned on Blake. He reassured Cassandra, "I'm perfectly fine. A minor accident like this won't deter me." Cassandra implored, "Please, be more cautious with your experiments in the future. History is littered with tales of brilliant wizards who met their end too soon. Remember Luna's mother's tragic accident during her curse research. Considering your penchant for inventing new potions and spells, it's only natural to worry." Blake offered a comforting smile. "Don't worry." Changing the subject, he asked, "Have you had breakfast yet?" Hermione shook her head. "No, I was concerned about you, and then I ran into Cassandra." "Well then, please make yourselves comfortable while I prepare something," Blake said, his own hunger now evident after a night of missed meals due to the explosion. He approached a section of the office wall, which slid open to reveal a compact kitchenette equipped with various cooking utensils and a stove. Blake prided himself on his culinary skills, believing that good food necessitated personal effort. He retrieved some vegetables from his magically enhanced refrigerator and enlisted the help of his pet Dabao with the preparations. "Squeak!" Dabao protested, but to no avail. Despite having spent the entire night on alchemical pursuits, Blake's mind remained surprisingly sharp, thanks to the lingering effects of a lucky potion. In no time, he had prepared 4 hearty breakfasts, including one for Dabao. As they sat down to eat, Dabao eagerly jumped onto the table, seizing a fork and diving into his shrimp omelet with gusto. Blake couldn't help but tease. "Since when did you develop a taste for anything other than desserts?" "Squeak!" Dabao responded, unfazed. Blake turned his attention back to his guests, handing them their plates. "Here you go. I hope you enjoy it." The aroma of the freshly prepared broth fast filled the room, a testament to Blake's culinary skills and his dedication to ensuring his friends started their day on a positive note. "Cassandra, just the aroma alone is enough to make me salivate, and the presentation is simply exquisite. It looks far more sophisticated from this angle," Cassandra commented with a smile. Hermione rolled her eyes in response. "Talking about sophistication after breakfast? Really, Cassandra?" she remarked, a hint of amusement in her tone. "It's been quite some time since we last enjoyed your cooking, Blake," Hermione couldn't help but add. Blake chuckled, a bit sheepishly. "Yes, I admit I've been a bit lazy recently. When I first mastered my cooking skills, I used to cook quite often, but then my studies and other responsibilities took over, leaving me with little time for anything else. It's only recently, after setting up my office and getting the small kitchen organized, that I've started cooking again." "So does this mean you're finally done with all that kept you busy?" Hermione asked, a hopeful note in her voice. Blake paused for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, I'm done. Does that mean you won't be going out as much anymore?" Hermione's eyes sparkled with anticipation. Cassandra stopped mid-bite, turning to Blake with eager eyes. "Not as often, no," Blake confirmed. "With Ariana and Laulep handling things, the 4th disaster is now self-sufficient. And with the chaos following Dracula's demise, there's no immediate threat. Grindelwald, too, has turned over a new leaf, so there's little need for my intervention. The only concern that lingers is the tower mentioned on the bead." "Let's go for a walk after breakfast," Blake suggested out of the blue. He realized he had spent too much time either away or secluded in the room of requirement, barely attending classes with Hermione or participating in the duel club. He even recalled the mixed emotions of the Hufflepuff Quidditch team when he stepped down as captain, handing the role over to Cedric. The team's relief at his departure, hidden behind their initial sadness, was not lost on him. Hermione gave Blake a thoughtful look, sensing something was amiss. "Okay, but be ready for what comes with it," Cassandra warned. "What do you mean?" Blake inquired. "Be prepared for a crowd seeking autographs and photos. You're quite the celebrity now. There's even a Blake Green fan club outside," Cassandra revealed with a chuckle. "What? Since when?" Blake was genuinely surprised. Cassandra continued, "You've become incredibly famous. People spend their days hoping to catch a glimpse of you, but you've always managed to elude them." Blake scratched his head in confusion. "I've heard of Harry Potter fan clubs, but when did I get my own?" Realizing a simple stroll might now be complicated, Blake sighed. "Who organized this fan meeting? It's only going to add to the chaos." Noticing Hermione and Cassandra exchanging guilty looks, Blake narrowed his eyes. "Wait a minute, don't tell me." "It was her idea," they both exclaimed, pointing at each other. "You! How could you?" they accused simultaneously. Blake, now understanding the situation, said, "Let me guess, this fan club was your doing? And let me guess further, you two are the presidents." Cassandra and Hermione guiltily avoided his gaze. "Given your personalities, I assume neither of you would take a back seat, so you're co-presidents, right?" Blake deduced, as Cassandra and Hermione's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "We didn't mean for it to become such a big deal," they admitted, their voices barely above a whisper, revealing the unintended consequences of their actions. "Either way, they were too enthusiastic," Cassandra said softly. They insisted that the president had to be you, Blake. They even begged us to give them some parchment with your signature and started calling us eldest sister. Moreover, we've noticed that since creating the fan club, their hostility towards us has significantly decreased, she added. Blake leaned back in his chair, a look of helpless resignation on his face. So, you've essentially sold me out? I didn't expect it. Is my fame really as exaggerated as they say? Hermione chimed in. You're completely unaware of your own popularity. Think of Lockhart in his prime. Your fame now surpasses his by 100-fold. Rubbing his forehead, Blake sighed. All right, if there's a president, there must be a vice president. I assume you two are the presidents. Who did you choose as the vice president? Cassandra began listing names, raising her fingers one by one. There's Nagini from the canteen, Autumn and Luna from Ravenclaw, Hannah from Hufflepuff, Ginny from Gryffindor. Oh, and senior sister Penello said she'd join after her exams. We're planning to make her the vice president. Blake scratched his head, puzzled. Why are all the members girls? Don't you find that odd? Cassandra sighed. What can I say? It seems you've unwittingly charmed them all. It's all because you're such a charmer. Who knows how many good sisters you've made out there, she added with a hint of resentment. Blake muttered under his breath. Maybe she's a good sister. Cassandra's eyes widened in surprise. What did you say? Coughing awkwardly, Blake quickly changed the subject. Nothing. Since we can't leave school for now, how about we go outside to play? He had initially wanted to take them to visit the subspace, but decided against it until he could confirm its safety and origins. Going outside? But that's against school rules, Hermione hesitated. Blake persuaded her with a mischievous tone. It's fine. You're in class with me, right? So I've decided to take you out for an extracurricular activity today. I doubt Professor McGonagall or anyone else would object. Besides, they won't know we've gone out, right? Okay, let's go for a walk. I'm tired of being cooped up in school every day, Cassandra exclaimed excitedly. Then let's go, Blake said, pushing his empty plate aside. Okay, Hermione agreed with a nod. Great then. Dabao, help me wash the dishes and take care of the house while we're out, Blake instructed. Dabao, looking utterly shocked, squeaked in protest, clearly confused by Blake's request. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Dabao's response seemed to carry a hint of indignation. What I said isn't in human language. Hey, watch your language, Blake joked. Let's take him with us, Hermione suggested, pulling out a small bag. Come on, Dabao, hop in, I'll carry you. After a few gestures, Dabao reluctantly climbed into the bag. Okay, we'll need to steer clear of Gringotts then, Blake said half-jokingly. Dabao popped his head out of the bag to protest loudly, as if to say Blake was unfairly accusing him. Hermione laughed. Dabao is quite the character. It would be amazing if we could actually talk to him. Remember you mentioned wanting to collaborate on creating a magical beast translator? It seems you forgot about it. Blake scratched his head. I didn't forget. I just got sidetracked. We can pick it back up when we return. What translator? Cassandra asked, suddenly wary. I'm planning to invent a device, Blake explained. Cassandra felt a pang of jealousy. You were specifically looking for Hermione. Why didn't you ask me? No, it just so happened she was available at the time, Blake replied, trying to keep a straight face. Cassandra's frustration was palpable. Sure, I believe you. You always have to be so secretive and exclusive. Hermione glanced at Cassandra, noting her evident annoyance. The corners of her mouth lifted slightly. Observing her expression, Cassandra's anger intensified. Yet, she felt powerless to act. Okay, let's not dwell on anger. Each one of you offers invaluable assistance. You're all my trusted aides, Blake said, pausing for effect before continuing. You are the wings that enable me to soar. Come, I've prepared a special gift for each of you. Chapter 488, Blake, I Want To. Blake expended considerable effort to soothe Cassandra without upsetting Hermione. The trio freshened up, changed their attire, and prepared to venture out. Let's head to Diagon Alley. My clothes have become somewhat tight, and I need to visit Madame Malkin's. I'll make sure not to overeat, Cassandra said, her brow furrowed in confusion. The garments she had ordered just a few months prior were now uncomfortably snug, particularly her shirts. If not for the high-quality, stretchy fabric from Madame Malkin's, buttoning them would have been a challenge. Hermione, too, seemed concerned, though she remained silent. Blake, feeling a bit guilty, touched his nose. Cassandra eyed him with suspicion. The potion you had us drink from the magic beauty salon, claiming it would greatly benefit girls. Could it be that there was something amiss with it? Did it cause me to gain weight? She accused. Blake quickly shook his head, denying any wrongdoing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that potion. Besides, why would I want you to gain weight? He protested, trying to maintain his innocence. After all, Blake considered himself a straightforward and honest individual, harboring no ill intentions. His only desire was for a girl to enhance her appearance modestly in certain areas. Ahem, Diagon Alley is teeming with familiar faces. Encountering acquaintances could prove troublesome, so why not venture to France? You've never visited Diagon Alley there, have you? Blake skillfully diverted the conversation. France? Hermione's interest was piqued, though she harbored suspicions. Are you intending to meet the Delacour sisters? Cassandra couldn't hide her jealousy. Absolutely. You correspond with them secretly every day, thinking I'm oblivious. Don't bother denying it. I've seen everything. Blake candidly admitted, I'm not seeking them out this time, truly. But yes, I do write to them daily. Cassandra was visibly upset, yet Blake's decision was final. Are you coming? If not, I'll go alone. With a wave of his hand, a dimensional door materialized before him. Cassandra, feeling a mix of anger and anxiety, reluctantly decided to follow. Hermione, sighing, grabbed her bag of treasures and joined them. Upon arrival, they discovered that Diagon Alley in France bore a different name, though they were unaware of what it was called. The youthful disputes quickly dissipated as they were captivated by the bustling streets, reminiscent of Diagon Alley, filled with an array of magical shops and merchandise. Blake leisurely followed, soon finding himself laden with numerous shopping bags. He cleverly applied the traceless stretch charm to manage the load more efficiently. Thanks to a confusion spell cast upon himself, Blake didn't worry about being recognized. Their exploration led them to the entrance of Gringotts. The French branch was noticeably busier, still recovering from a recent incident in the UK. Suddenly, Blake spotted an elderly wizard and a tall goblin exiting Gringotts. The wizard was Old Lep, and the goblin was Locke, the president of the UK's Gringotts. Though the reason for Locke's visit to the French Gringotts was unclear, his disheartened expression suggested a less-than-pleasant meeting with Old Lep. After a brief exchange, Old Lep disappeared with a pop, while Locke, looking dejected, spat on the ground and muttered curses before returning inside. Blake watched the scene unfold with a smirk. Following Dracula's demise, it seemed Chaos Wish could no longer offer refuge to the goblins. It was likely that Old Lep and Ariana had... Blake delivered another powerful blow, but since he had temporarily delegated the responsibility of handling the fourth natural disaster to Ariana and Lao Rep, he felt a sense of freedom to explore. Amidst his thoughts, he pondered whether they could inquire from a goblin about what a high tower might be. Cassandra's voice snapped him back to reality. "Hey, aren't you going to buy anything?" she asked. Blake responded with a smile. "No, I thought perhaps you'd also buy me a gift." Cassandra offered a slightly awkward smile in return. In her spree of shopping, fueled by a mix of grief and anger, it hadn't crossed her mind to purchase something for Blake. Just then, Hermione presented an old locket, saying, "This is for you. I just bought it. It's adorned with some ancient runes. Thought you might like it?" Blake joyfully accepted the locket, teasing Cassandra. "See, Hermione not only got me a gift, but also remembered my fondness for antiquities." Cassandra clenched her teeth, silently fuming at Hermione's gesture. Blake examined the locket closely, intrigued not by its age but by a familiar magical essence it seemed to emanate from the north. "What's wrong?" Cassandra inquired, half expecting to hear it was a counterfeit. "Oh, it's not that," Blake reassured, causing Cassandra's expression to darken momentarily. "Where did you find this?" Blake asked Hermione, realizing he hadn't noticed where she had ventured off to make the purchase. Hermione, puzzled, replied, "I got it from that stall over there. I've learned enough from you to distinguish a fake from the real deal." They approached the stall, where a bald wizard greeted them nervously, recognizing Hermione and the locket in Blake's hand. Speaking in heavily accented English, he said, "Guest, what's the issue? The transaction is complete, and I don't offer refunds." Blake clarified, We're not seeking a refund. I'm merely curious about the locket's origin. The stall owner explained he had acquired it from an antique dealer in England, but knew little about the dealer's whereabouts. He mentioned the dealer had found the items in 10 abandoned villages across England. Blake inquired if there were more items from the same source, prompting the owner to present a silver bottle, beautifully crafted yet impossible to open, hinting at a potential curse. Blake examined the bottle, confirming the presence of a curse. The owner, sensing Blake's interest, offered to sell it. "How many galleons do you want for it?" Blake asked, locking eyes with the stall owner, ready to uncover more about the mysterious items and their origins. With a smile, Blake countered the shopkeeper's steep price. 150 gold galleons? No, that's not a fair price. Despite not getting a clear look at Blake, the shopkeeper had noticed the lavish manner in which the two girls accompanying him were dressed, as well as their generous spending. It was clear to him that Blake was not lacking in funds. Spotting such a lucrative customer, the shopkeeper was determined to make the most of the opportunity. Hermione's eyes widened in shock. The locket she had purchased earlier had only cost a few silver coins. Why was a bottle now priced at 150 gold galleons? "Okay, 10 gold galleons, deal," Blake said cheerfully. Perhaps you misheard. I said 150 gold galleons. You see, acquiring this item from the merchant cost me over 100 gold galleons, the shopkeeper persisted, attempting to deceive them further. "Oh, really? But when you acquired these goods from the merchant, wasn't the price 10 gold galleons each? Why has it suddenly jumped to more than 100 gold galleons for me?" Blake asked, his smile unwavering. The shopkeeper's expression faltered. How did you know? You looked into my eyes, didn't you?" Blake laughed. "What? Curse it, you're a legilimens," the shopkeeper exclaimed in frustration. "So, 10 gold galleons, do we have a deal? This item is of no use to you anyway," Blake proposed, still smiling. The shopkeeper was tempted to refuse out of spite, to claim he'd rather keep the bottle as a decoration than sell it to someone like Blake. But the allure of easy money was too strong. 10 gold galleons was a significant amount, enough to recoup his investment immediately. "Fine, deal. Damn, I despise you mind readers," he grumbled, avoiding Blake's gaze as he accepted the money. Blake simply smiled, placing 10 gold galleons on the stall. "Take your bottle and leave quickly," the shopkeeper muttered, eager to see the back of them. As they walked away, both Cassandra and Hermione eyed the bottle in Blake's hand with curiosity. "Blake, what in the world is in there to warrant a price of 10 gold galleons?" Hermione asked, puzzled. Despite their extravagant shopping spree, they had spent only 7 or 8 gold galleons in total. Prices in the wizarding world were generally low, making the cost of Blake's seemingly unopenable bottle all the more baffling. "I've been told it houses a pot fairy capable of granting any wish. Do you believe that?" Blake teased with a smile. "I don't believe it," Cassandra replied skeptically. What the bottle actually contained was a potent concentration of ancient magical power. Many years ago, a fifth-year transfer student had absorbed all the ancient magic in the vicinity of Hogwarts, leaving none to be found in the years since. Thus, the magic emanating from this supreme treasure was still in its most primal form. For Blake, who was not primarily reliant on ancient magic, the opportunity to enhance his abilities simply by shopping was too good to pass up. He suspected the lucky potion he had consumed that morning was playing a role in his fortunate finds. With a sense of anticipation for what other treasures he might stumble upon, Blake carefully stored the bottle away. "I'll explain later. For now, just know it's something that might seem useless to you, but is quite valuable to me," he said in response to Cassandra's inquiry. Though Cassandra and Hermione were brimming with curiosity, they respected Blake's privacy. Together, they continued their exploration of Diagon Alley in France, with Blake's luck seemingly on an upswing. In addition to the bottle, he discovered a rare magic book in an old bookstore detailing powerful spells, and stumbled upon a mutated rune egg among a pile of ordinary ostrich eggs in a potion ingredient shop. The value of the rune snake is exceptionally high. Its eggs and shed skin are highly sought after as expensive potion ingredients, especially those from mutated specimens. On one fortunate day, Blake entered a lottery at a local store, and astonishingly won the grand prize of 500 gold galleons, leaving the store owner dumbfounded and at a loss for words. After their adventure on the wizarding commercial street, Blake and his companions ventured into the Muggle world for some shopping. With a considerable amount of Muggle money at his disposal, Blake seized the opportunity to purchase some modern Muggle electronics, which he referred to humorously as electric celery. By the time they returned to Hogwarts and settled into Blake's office, night had already fallen. "Did you enjoy today?" Blake asked, pulling up a chair and sitting down with a smile. "I did, but—" Cassandra moved closer to Blake, playfully rubbing her foot against his calf. "I might have overdone it with the walking. My legs are a bit sore. Could you give me a massage?" she asked softly, her cheeks flushing at the thought of Blake's skilled hands. Before Blake could respond, Hermione chimed in. "Actually, my legs are sore too, and my waist and neck as well. Could you give me a massage like you did last time?" Cassandra's eyes widened in disbelief. This woman's request was audacious. And when had Blake given Hermione a massage? This was news to her. Blake, however, was immediately invigorated by the request. "All right, head up and lie down on the bed, but make sure to take a shower first," he instructed with a knowing smile. The scene was set for an evening of relaxation and camaraderie, as Blake prepared to lend his massage skills to soothe the aches and pains of his friends, unaware of the small ripple of jealousy that had stirred in Cassandra's heart. Chapter 489, Hermione, a massage? Something's not right. Originally, Blake had intended to resume unpacking the boxes after escorting Cassandra and Hermione out. However, the girls had other plans, requesting massages instead. Discussions about subspace and supreme treasure chests were postponed until the next day. "This isn't right," Hermione remarked, a hint of surprise in her voice. "After a day of shopping, you must be tired and sweaty. It would be more comfortable to take a shower first. There's a bathroom upstairs. Plus, didn't you buy a bunch of new clothes today? It would be the perfect opportunity to show them off," Blake teased, a playful smile on his face. Hermione's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Though she had mentioned wanting a massage earlier, the idea of taking a shower right away made her self-conscious. At that moment, Cassandra stood up, grabbed a small bag Blake had placed on the table earlier, and headed upstairs without a word. Hermione watched her, surprised. Despite Cassandra's composed exterior, her slightly trembling legs betrayed her nervousness. Okay, then I'll get everything ready," Blake said, stretching his wrist. "Since Cassandra went up first, I'll start with her." He took out his wand and cast a spell around the entire office. "What are you doing?" Hermione inquired, curiosity piqued. "Oh, this isn't a soundproof room of requirement, and as you're aware, my massage techniques are quite unique. Without magical soundproofing, there's a chance everyone in the school might overhear your reactions tonight," Blake explained nonchalantly. Hermione's face turned a deeper shade of red, almost as if she was about to bleed from embarrassment. She thought to herself, "He's talking about me. Was I really that loud?" And then she blamed Wole. "It's all her fault. Why suggest a massage if there's nothing wrong? I'm so confused now." However, to ensure Cassandra wasn't left alone with Blake, Hermione decided to stay. "Hermione, you're too tense. You should relax, or your studies will start to feel like a burden," Blake advised, pulling out a rune snake egg from his pocket. Dabao, his pet, dragged over a basin filled with hay, which had been its nest. But since Blake had bought it a new nest today, Dabao was willing to repurpose the old one. Blake placed the rune eggs on the hay, and Hermione whispered, "Okay. Just wait here for a bit. After I assist Cassandra, you can go take your shower," Blake said, rummaging through his bag for the items he had purchased that day. Hermione picked up a book to read, but found herself unable to concentrate, her mind preoccupied with thoughts of Blake's massage techniques, feeling both shy and excited. Suddenly they heard Cassandra's trembling voice from upstairs. "Blake, I'm fine," Blake responded and handed a piece of wood to Dabao. "Help me fix the rune snake's nest. If you have any questions, the instructions are over there, and remember, don't go upstairs." Dabao looked at Blake, astonished. Squeak! The idea of a sniff reading instructions and doing manual labor seemed absurd to it. "Hermione, let's go up," Blake said with a smile. Hermione replied softly, following Blake upstairs. Upon reaching the top, they found Cassandra standing beside the bed in a brand new nightgown, her blonde hair loose and her face flushed as she looked down at her toes. Blake caught a glimpse of her and struggled to maintain his composure, taken aback by Cassandra's boldness tonight. Hermione, trailing behind Blake, gasped upon seeing Cassandra's daring attire. This woman is really going too far. Was she trying to provoke me all day? Is she really this desperate? It's shameless. Yet, recalling how Cassandra had eagerly learned blood spells from her before, Hermione realized that such behavior was not entirely out of character for her. Ahem. Cassandra, where exactly are you feeling discomfort? Blake managed to ask, despite being visibly flustered by Cassandra's forwardness. Cassandra, noticing Hermione's shocked expression, lifted her chin provocatively, ready to challenge any preconceived notions. Cassandra perched on the edge of the bed, her white calves exposed. My calves are really sore. Could you press them for me? She asked. Okay, Blake responded, quickly pulling up a chair to sit opposite her. Despite his initial surprise at Cassandra's boldness that evening, Blake, a seasoned teacher, regained his composure swiftly. It wasn't the first time he had offered her a massage. Before he could utter a word, Cassandra extended her calf onto Blake's thigh. You can apply more pressure. I won't get cramps, she assured him. Hermione, observing the scene, frowned at Cassandra's actions before shaking her head and retreating to the bathroom with her clothes. She had grown somewhat accustomed to their antics. Cassandra bit her lip in disappointment. She had hoped to provoke Hermione, known for her sensitivity, but her plan had failed. The rivalry between the two girls seemed to only bring joy to Blake. He knew better than to decline such an opportunity. With a flick of his wand, he sealed the attic stairs and cast several soundproofing spells. Meanwhile, Dabao downstairs was puzzling over an instruction manual when he heard the sound of the stairs retracting. Is no one concerned about privacy anymore? What am I supposed to do? Just sniff around by myself? This is terrifying. I can't deal with this master anymore. Upstairs, after Hermione had shut the bathroom door, Cassandra stood abruptly. What are you planning? Blake whispered. Leaning close, Cassandra whispered in his ear, Use your magic with all your might. You know what I mean. Blake realized he was being tempted. Hermione, regretting her decision to retreat so quickly, tried to calm herself in the bathroom. Take a deep breath and calm down. Ignore her. Blake's massages are always somewhat noisy, she reassured herself. However, just as she began to relax, Cassandra's muffled voice reached her again. Blake, you're not even trying. Are you underestimating me? Oh, you seem quite bold, Blake replied. Of course, I'm incredibly brave, Cassandra boasted. All right then, I'll put in more effort. Wait. The more Hermione listened, the more agitated she became. Was this truly just a massage? The sounds suggested otherwise. Overwhelmed, she burst out of the bathroom. What are you doing? She exclaimed, only to freeze in place. She found Blake seated on the sofa, earnestly massaging Cassandra's arm. Turning to Hermione, Blake asked, What's the matter, Hermione? Is it too loud? My apologies. I should have extended the soundproofing to the bathroom. No, I don't need it, Hermione stammered, retreating back into the bathroom, her face in her hands. What was I thinking? They were merely massaging. Outside, Cassandra grasped Blake's hand and asked with a hint of anxiety, How did you know she would come out so quickly? Blake smirked mischievously. What happened to your confidence? Scared now? So do you want to continue? Chapter 490. A mature shoo-shoo must learn to cook for himself. After spending a considerable amount of time in the bathroom, Hermione finally felt recovered. She emerged from a hurried bath to find Cassandra fully dressed and sitting on the sofa, with Blake standing behind her, tying her hair. Okay, you can go back first, Blake said. Cassandra nodded and made her way towards the stairs. As Blake turned to Hermione, he noticed Cassandra pausing, holding onto the banister and smiling back at him. She mouthed silently, I'll come back to you later, before quickening her pace and disappearing around the corner. Hermione's movements were no less significant than Cassandra's, though she was noticeably more restrained. By the time Blake bid a blushing Hermione farewell, it was already past 9 in the evening. With no other choice, Hermione quietly opened a dimensional door and left. Blake, now drenched in sweat, decided it was time for a shower. However, Upon opening the bathroom door, he was surprised to find Cassandra waiting inside. Her mastery of the dimensional gate made her return no difficult feat, especially after hinting at it earlier. Leaning against the wall, she looked at Blake with a playful smile, her large green eyes sparkling with mischief. Blake returned the smile with a mischievous grin. "So, there's a second act?" he teased. The morning sun woke Blake up. He sat up in bed, finding Cassandra had already left. After stretching and climbing out of bed, he deactivated the soundproofing magic, descended the ladder, and walked downstairs. To his surprise, he found Dabao asleep on the table, with a newly repaired nest of rune snakes in front of him. Blake was impressed that Dabao had followed the manual's instructions to the letter. It seemed that both humans and animals could achieve greatness when pushed beyond their limits. Looking at Dabao with admiration, Blake mused, "It seems I've discovered a new way to utilize Shu Shu." Dabao, oblivious to his master's scheming, simply turned over in his sleep. Perhaps due to the previous night's awkwardness, Hermione didn't visit that morning, and Cassandra, likely exhausted, hadn't reappeared. Blake took this opportunity to focus on his own tasks. He eyed the two supreme treasure boxes in his system space. Initially planning to open them, he realized the cooldown period for the lucky potion hadn't yet passed, forcing him to wait. Reflecting on his recent stroke of luck, Blake retrieved the silver bottle he had purchased the day before. After a thorough examination with the Eye of Truth confirmed it was curse-free, he placed his hand on the bottle cap. A blue light flashed, and the cap, which had resisted others' attempts, easily opened under Blake's touch, a privilege granted only to those versed in ancient magic. As the bottle opened, wisps of black mist escaped. Blake knew this mist could enhance his ancient magic. Closing his eyes, he inhaled deeply, absorbing the mist until none remained. When he opened his eyes again, his blue pupils had transformed into a striking blood color, indicating a significant increase in his ancient magic power. As Blake observed his newfound power, he couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and anticipation for what lay ahead. The ancient magic coursing through Blake's veins surged, unleashing a torrent of negative emotions within him. Frustration, anger, regret, and hatred clouded his mind, causing his brow to furrow in discomfort. However, as these feelings gradually ebbed away, Blake noticed a significant increase in his ancient magical power. An epiphany struck him. The potion he had encountered was not merely a reservoir of ancient magical energy from the ruins, but also a vessel for the negative emotions harvested by ancient magic. Blake recalled how a previous user of ancient magic, a transfer student, had harnessed the ability to extract emotions from others, amplifying his own power. This realization led Blake to understand that the enhancement he experienced was twofold, surpassing his initial expectations. The origins of these negative emotions, whether they were remnants of the transfer student's work or the legacy of an ancient magic practitioner before him, were irrelevant. What mattered was the substantial boost to Blake's mastery over ancient magic and his deepened understanding of its workings. With a thoughtful expression, Blake retrieved a nondescript wand from his inventory. Aiming it at the table, he unleashed a faint blue light from its tip. Miraculously, a bud sprouted from the table's surface, quickly growing into a small tree. With a mere flick of his wand, the tree burgeoned with branches laden with blossoming buds, filling the room with an intoxicating floral scent. The sudden fragrance roused Dabao, Blake's pet, from its slumber. Rubbing its eyes, Dabao gazed at Blake in confusion, wondering why its owner was cultivating trees indoors. With another wave of his wand, Blake reduced the tree to ashes, erasing both the tree and the floral scent from the room. Reflecting on his use of ancient magic, Blake realized its essence was fundamentally different from the conventional magic practiced by wizards. Traditional magic relied on wands and incantations to manipulate reality, whereas ancient magic was guided by the practitioner's will, requiring neither spells nor wands. This realization underscored the superior potency and versatility of ancient magic, capable of both offensive and everyday applications. Blake marveled at the inherent strength of ancient magic, which allowed even a novice like the transfer student to achieve feats beyond the reach of seasoned wizards. The realization that intense emotions, particularly negative ones, could amplify magical power was a revelation. It aligned with Professor Dumbledore's belief that love, with its capacity to evoke strong emotions, was the most potent form of magic. This insight offered Blake a new perspective on power acquisition. Instead of scouring the globe for ancient magical sources, he could harness the negative emotions of others to bolster his own strength. However, this enthusiasm was tempered by a cautious reminder of the potential consequences of exploiting others' emotions. Emotions seemed to have side effects on the person being absorbed. Blake pondered this, realizing the complexity of the situation. Meanwhile, Dabao, his pet niffler, was visibly upset. It had worked tirelessly through the night to construct a runed snake nest, only to be met with indifference from Blake. Not only had Blake failed to acknowledge Dabao's hard work, but he also hadn't provided breakfast. Instead, Blake had been preoccupied with his own tasks, leaving Dabao feeling neglected. Observing Dabao's frustration, Blake couldn't help but smile slightly. With a gentle wave of his wand, he extracted a wisp of black air from Dabao's chest. Instantly, Dabao's mood shifted from resentment to joy, though a sense of emptiness lingered. Confused by the sudden change in emotions, Dabao began to question what was happening. Recognizing the discomfort, Blake returned the black energy to Dabao, restoring its previous state of discontent. Attempting to appease Dabao, Blake reassured him, Okay, I'll make breakfast now. But remember, Dabao, a mature creature like you should learn to fend for itself." Before Dabao could process the situation, it found itself in the kitchen, knife in hand, bewildered by the unexpected turn of events. The notion of a niffler cooking was absurd, and Dabao felt overwhelmed by the unreasonable expectations. Blake's voice echoed, suggesting that if Dabao could handle complex tasks like building a nest, cooking should be manageable. Dabao was left in disbelief, questioning the appropriateness of such demands. Meanwhile, Blake turned his attention to the mysterious absence of Hermione and Cassandra. Utilizing the Eye of Truth and the speed of his suspension cloak, he scoured the entire subspace, a peaceful paradise spanning approximately 72 square kilometers. This realm, filled with diverse terrains and creatures, held potential for future endeavor. Upon returning, Blake discovered letters from Hermione and Cassandra, explaining their absence due to other commitments. Unperturbed by their missing classes, Blake proceeded with his projects, including the installation of Muggle appliances in his bedroom. To power these devices, he ingeniously modified a diesel generator using magical energy, concealing it behind a wall with the traceless stretching charm. As Blake finalized his arrangements, the sound of the compartment door closing echoed, marking the completion of another task in his ever-evolving magical and mundane world. Hidden away, Blake surveyed the Muggle appliances scattered throughout the house, all humming and buzzing in perfect harmony. A smile of satisfaction spread across his face as he lay back on the bed, only to leap up moments later, his attention captured by the latest marvel of the Muggle world, a VCD player. With a bit of tinkering, he managed to project the VCD's image onto a makeshift movie screen. His choice of entertainment for the evening was Jurassic Park, a film that had just hit the shelves that year. As he nestled into the bed, the opening credits rolling before him stirred a wave of nostalgia. It dawned on him that, in his entire life, he had scarcely watched a movie. His childhood, spent assisting Mrs. Marianne with the orphans, left no room for such luxuries. And once at Hogwarts, the incompatibility of Muggle electronics with the magical environment had snuffed out any remaining opportunities. But now, he mused, the mundane entertainments of the wizarding world could be left behind. Blake had prepared well for this moment, surrounding himself with an assortment of snacks and drinks from the local convenience store, settling in for the movie. Well, we have snacks, we have drinks, we have movies. What else could possibly be missing? He pondered aloud. After a brief pause, a mischievous grin spread across his face. "Oh, I need a girl!" Meanwhile, in the Slytherin common room, which was deserted due to ongoing classes, Cassandra sat by the window, lost in a book. However, her unfocused gaze betrayed her lack of engagement with the text. Suddenly, a white phoenix guardian materialized from the wall, hovering before Cassandra. Blake's voice emanated from the phoenix, urgent and clear. "Emergency! Come quickly!" And just as suddenly as it had appeared, the phoenix vanished. Cassandra sat frozen for a moment, taken aback. Blake had never sought her out with such desperation. What could possibly have happened? She didn't allow herself to dwell on the question, quickly setting aside her book and hastening towards the door.